I didn't think my back could hold
Please. The regular meeting of the City Commission for Tuesday, February 11th, 2020 will come to order. They can't hear me. All right. How's that? Better? Okay. The regular meeting of the City Commission for Tuesday, February 11th will come to order. Please silence your cell phones. City Clerk, if you'd call the roll, please.
Mayor Owen.
Here.
Vice Mayor Coloding.
Here.
Commissioner Hartman.
Here.
Commissioner McGirt.
Here.
Commissioner Sacks.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to start off with an invocation and a pledge. Those of you that are not already standing, if you would join us in standing for that, remain standing after the invocation for the pledge. Police Department Chaplain, Pastor P. Carter.
Let us pray. Oh Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity to assemble and to discuss those things that might serve to make our community and city better in the spirit of fairness and equality. We thank you for all those who serve our city faithfully. We ask that you continue to lead, guide, and protect them as they do their due diligence along the way. We ask that you bless all who reside and visit this place we call New Smyrna Beach. May they always find it a place to enjoy. In your matchless name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item up is approval of the agenda. We had a request that came in for item 8B, that is the borrow pit. Some of you may be familiar with it. A request for continuance of that item. That will be something that the commission will decide tonight, whether or not we go forward with that continuance or hear and decide that item tonight. So the question for the commission is, do I have a motion to continue this item until April the 14th would be the first meeting after that 60 days. Just to be clear, what will happen, we can, if I get a motion on that, we can vote. If that is approved, it would be continued. No action would take place between now and then. If that's not approved, as a commission, I would recommend that we, since I think that's what the majority of the people are here for tonight, I'd recommend we just go ahead and hear that item right after this. So it would just be moved up to the next item on the agenda if we choose to not grant this continuance that has been requested by the applicant. Gentlemen, that's the issue before us. I'll be looking for a motion from the commission. We have to choose to accept or deny. So let's have a motion to...
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve continuance until April the 14th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. City Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Commissioner McGirt.
No.
Commissioner Sacks.
No.
Vice Mayor Coloding.
Yes.
Commissioner Hartman.
No.
Mayor Owen.
I'm a no as well. So the item is not continued. We will hear this item tonight. And with that, if the applicant is ready, again, if the commission is okay with the change to the agenda, I'd like to hear item 8B at this time, and then we'll allow everyone to disperse that would like, and we'll continue on. You'll note that I'm moving it above public participation in the agenda, but it is a public hearing. So we do want to hear from those that wish to speak, and we'll talk more about that at that time. But I just wanted you to be clear that just because I'm moving it above public participation, you will have a chance to speak on this item at this time. And then for all the other items you might want to talk about, we're going to do that shortly after this. We're going to go through this one item, and then we'll talk about every other item of business in the city after that in public participation. With that, staff report.
Please state your name. Brian Scott Fields.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Real quick before we dive in, so this is a quasi judicial public hearing to consider the approval of a borrow pit for vacant property located at State Road 44 in Sugar Mill. Gentlemen, this is our time to disclose any ex parte communications. That'd be communications we've had directly with the applicant outside of this meeting, to include the substance of those, the identity of whom, and the who those took place and the substance of that to the extent we're able to recall. I'll start with the Vice Mayor.
I obviously have passed the site. I know the conditions well. I also responded to a request from the applicant to meet with him, I believe, 2 times here in City Hall.
Okay.
That's the extent of it.
Commissioner Sacks.
And Mr. Mayor, I had 2 ex partes, one in person with the applicant and counsel, and another on the telephone with counsel.
Okay. Commissioner McGurk.
Yes, I met with the applicant's attorney, Mark Watt.
Commissioner Hartman.
Yeah, I've met with them twice here at City Hall, and then also had a phone conversation with Mr. Watts and drive by the site every day.
And like others, drive by the site obviously daily, or most daily. I've met with the applicant, I think, once at City Hall, had a couple of other phone conversations. No evidence, though, that will not be presented tonight. We didn't talk about anything that won't be presented tonight in evidence. So with that, Mr. Fields, you've been sworn in. So please state your educational background and professional background.
Education, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Maryland. I have a Master's in Business Administration from the University of Florida. My professional background, my position here is the Assistant City Manager and Director of Development Services. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Florida. I have 25 years of experience in land development, engineering, planning, permitting, public administration, and related services.
Does any member of the audience or commission wish to question Mr. Fields on his professional qualifications? Seeing none, any objections to qualifying him as an expert witness in the area of land development? Being no objections, he's determined to be an expert in the area of land development and qualified to give opinion testimony concerning these matters. Mr. Fields, are you familiar with the proposed special exception use of a borrow pit on this property?
Yes.
Please state whether it's consistent with the city comprehensive plan and share your recommendation on this use.
Yes, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We have a brief overview. I'm going to introduce the topic and then hand it over to Chief Planner Jeff Gove for a little bit more detail. This is a special exception request for a borrow pit on a 119-acre undeveloped property on the south side of State Road 44, south of the Sugar Mill Drive intersection. First, a borrow pit, what is it? That question came up a lot. Just briefly, a borrow pit is a deep excavation of land similar to what is done for a stormwater retention pond, except it's a little bit larger, in this case much deeper than you would have for a typical stormwater pond. That excavated dirt is loaded into dump trucks, hauled off the site, and typically sold to other construction projects. That would occur in this proposal for a period of 2 to 5 years. When the excavation is complete, the site would be restored. That hole in the ground is not filled back up with dirt, and the water level returns to its natural state, and in this case what's proposed is it would be restored to look like a natural lake or a stormwater pond. This is a special exception, so the key item in the criteria tonight, just to frame it for the commission, is in the code is to determine if this requested use will impair the character of the surrounding or adjoining districts nor be detrimental to the public health, morals, or welfare. It's very broad. A lot of discretion is available to the commission in making that determination. So when this first came in, our staff had some significant concerns, and those are outlined in the report, and Jeff will get to those. I think in looking at this for the commission's consideration, kind of jump to our conclusion in our staff report is that if this were considered a temporary use with the 2 to 5 years, and if the applicant strictly complied with what is a very long list of conditions, that the commission could determine that this use is acceptable at this property. So just general overview of I'm going to hand it over to Jeff now, Chief Planner, to talk a little bit more detail.
Okay. Jeff, got to get you sworn in as well. Carrie.
Please state your name.
It's Jeff Gove.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you would Do we need to go through the whole educational professional background probably for him?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you would give your educational professional background.
Okay, I have a bachelor's degree in political science, urban studies from Trinity College, graduate studies from University of Georgia School of Environmental Design. I've been a practicing planner in the state of Florida and Volusia County for 25 years and certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners for 25 years.
Thank you. Does any member of the audience or the commission wish to question Mr. Gove on his professional qualifications? Hearing none, any objections qualifying him as an expert witness in the area of land development? Hearing none, he's determined to be an expert in the area of land development, qualified to give opinion testimony. Mr. Gove, what's your testimony?
Sure. Brian went ahead and gave you the basic details. The 119-acre parcel that we're talking about, that is zoned A1 agriculture, allows for this use as a special exception. Of that 119 acres, the project area is proposed as being 36 acres within the northwest area of the parcel, closer to 44, with the ultimate size of the borrow pit upon completion to be 18 acres. Besides being zoned A1 agriculture, it has a somewhat unique and somewhat conflicting designation in the future land use as being the activity center, which is designated for urban uses rather than these type of agriculture uses. But it's kind of a remnant from when it was annexed into the city and a holding pattern. It's still used for agricultural purposes at this time. It's got an ag exemption from the pasture use. Also within the property, there is an existing borrow pit that we don't really know the history of, but apparently dates back to the 1970s with the construction of I-95. The overpass that's right there, it's not unusual to see these kind of small remnant borrow pit areas. That's 7.3 acres, the existing borrow pit, and again, this would expand it to 18 acres. Also, the site access for the operations is not actually proposed through the parcel that's being proposed for the special exception, but through another property owned by the same owner, which is the abandoned gas station property in the northwest part of this property. We've discussed that as far as whether that's our preferred access, but that is regulated by DOT, and they're the ones who would give the ultimate approval or disapproval. During those discussions, one of the things that we arrived at with the applicants was that if they use that gas station site for access, they agreed to take down the existing gas station building and any infrastructure that's in there and bring it back to somewhat clean site. One other aspect of that is while that operations would be going on, that gas station site would not be available for any other sale or use. It would strictly serve as the site access for the borrow pit operations. And one other point to mention with that actually has a different zoning of B3, so it's not compatible with the agricultural use and not actually associated with that application or special exception ability. There's various exhibits in your staff report. There's a site plan, 7 pages, that includes a reclamation plan and a buffer along 44. That was something that was also agreed to during the months that we were discussing this with the applicant. This was first submitted in May of 2019, went to the planning board in December of 2019. And with that site plan, with those negotiations, was buffer requirements along 44 to screen what is a pretty clear visibility into the site right now, including a earthen buffer that would be 6 feet high and 40 feet wide. The applicants have agreed to that and shown that on the site plan. As far as being consistent with the comp plan, there are provisions that do allow that, as we mentioned, and as Brian mentioned, the way we found this could be consistent was strictly as a temporary use And with those list of conditions, there's about 7 different primary conditions with various sub-requirements under those. As far as the site access, that had been an issue that we had gone back and forth with the applicant. Our preferred access from the beginning, our initial discussions with the applicant, was for that to occur at the signalized Sugar Mill intersection. So it would be what we saw as a cleaner impact. The trucks that would exit the site would do so at a signal. They could go east, west, north from there and not have to do the U-turns, not have to cross traffic as they would from the gas station site that they're proposing for access. Ultimately, DOT was a deciding factor on that, and their preference was the gas station site. So given that, we did our best to work within the framework of their proposal for access to and from that gas station site. One of the considerations in there was the fact that there's a high level of traffic in there. There's over 35,000 cars per day from the traffic count in that area, and for trucks exiting the site and going north or west, they would have to enter the 2 eastbound lanes and get into the left turn lane. So the 2 eastbound lanes, it's a distance about 300 to 400 feet, and to get into the turn lane, which is about 700 feet. And from there, they could take a left turn to go up north, or if they were heading west, they'd have to do a U-turn. Those were all our concerns, and we addressed those to the applicants and DOT, and the end result was that DOT preferred that access location, and we just made the conditions subject to that, given DOT's opinion on that.
Okay.
There's various review criteria that the commission has available to look at this application. There's specific references in the section of the Land Development Code that deal with excavations that allow you to consider what your preferred land use would be for the property. There's also other criteria in terms of compatibility with the comprehensive plan, and as I mentioned, there is a somewhat of a conflict between the zoning and the future land use. There's also the special exception criteria that Brian had mentioned that does give you some kind of broad discretion in reviewing this application. So the 3 primary issues we saw in dealing with this was the comprehensive plan and its consistency with that, the site access, and general compatibility with the surrounding area. And that's basically the major points of what we looked at. There's a lot more in the staff report.
Yeah.
We looked at all the exhibits they had given to us and
Okay.
can address any questions you may have.
All right. So before we dive in, just to set the stage for everyone else, I should have done this up front. My apologies. So the order is going to go something like this. We've had the city has made a presentation. We're going to have questions from the commission or from the applicant to the city. We're then going to hear from the applicant and any witnesses they would like to call. And then at that point, we'll also hear from members of the public. And once we get to that, we'll talk a little bit about how we can do that as efficiently and effectively as possible. But just so you know, the order of events. So with that, commission questions for staff. I saw you, Commissioner McGurk.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, I think you went over this clearly, but I still think I need to hear it again. I apologize. DOT wants them to exit the gas station property, cross the eastbound lanes of 44 to make a U-turn to go west or to go to that intersection to go north on Sugar Mill. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we somewhat pressed the issue with the applicants and DOT to the point where our staff report includes the email correspondence we had with DOT where we had some pretty explicit and detailed questions, and our responses that we got back were basically 1 or 2 words, and
I thought you were going to say we had some explicit comments, which would have been warranted in this case, I think. Well, thank you. I just wanted to clarify because that just it boggles my mind. It's hard for me to comprehend how DOT wants the large, heavy trucks to enter a road of fast-moving traffic and cross over 2 lanes to get to a intersection, but apparently they did. Thank you. That was, I just wanted to make sure I understood that crystal clear. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of staff at this time? Commissioner, Vice Mayor Colodey, I'll come to you, Chief.
I do have questions, however, I would prefer to hear the applicant's
Okay,
case first.
yeah, that's fine.
So, Mr. Gove, please stay put.
Any questions just for staff, or do we want to move forward and hear applicant for yours, or just a question for staff?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, quick question for staff. In your, Brian or Jeff, please. In your consideration, did you look at the old gas station and the possibility of leaking gas tanks? I understand that 1 gallon of gasoline can pollute 1 million gallons of water. So that was a new concern that just came to me. Besides the hydrological negative effects of a borrow pit and dewatering.
Well, I'm sure the applicants can address that, but we had inquired about that, and we were told that the tanks had come out and the site was certified as being clean. What would follow, should you approve this, would be a site plan application, and in the course of that, since they're using that site, we would then ask for written evidence to prove that. But at this point, we didn't get into that detail.
And so no plume was observed.
That's what we were told, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Hartman, any questions at this point of staff?
This site plan application, would it come back before us, or could it be done at your level?
This would normally be done at the staff level for this type of application. However, you could make it a condition if you wanted to consider approval to have that site plan brought back to this board.
Okay. Would the applicant like to question staff at this point? Or if not, you're up for a presentation at this point as well? Sure. If you'd step up and just at least give your name and address, or name for the record.
My name is Glenn Storch. I represent the applicant in this case, and I did have one question. As to all of the conditions listed that recommended for the recommendation of approval, did the applicant agree to all those recommendations, all those conditions?
Yes, as far as we know, the applicant has agreed to all of the conditions that are listed in the staff report.
That's it.
Okay. All right, we'll now hear from the applicant and any witnesses you would choose to present. They have a chance to testify either in favor or against. Yeah. So, it's not usually questions, no. All right. Before we get into this, just for audience's benefit, obviously I know folks are here passionate about this issue. I ask you to be respectful, keep professional decorum. You might hear something you agree with or disagree with. We'll get to that. You'll have your chance to speak.
And again, for the record, my name is Glenn Storch. I represent the applicant in this case. And I should point out that one of the reasons we did request a continuance is because within the last couple of days, we heard there was questions on this. Obviously, it's really important to me to answer any questions, especially if there's a misunderstanding. And so I thought that would be a good thing to do, to be able to have that time to do that. But that's fine. We're prepared to go. So the bottom line is this. This is a plan and a project that is good for the city, and it is good for the applicant. And the applicant in this case is the Kitchens family. It is also, of course, there's also another applicant involved, the people who are doing the excavation. So those are the people who are actually doing the things that we want done. But it's important for the Kitchens, who have maintained this 119-acre piece of property as undeveloped for years, to be able to continue to do so. And so that's one of the things I thought was important for my representation of these people and how we dealt with this, and how we dealt with this as far as creating public good. So let's start with the first thing. This is a 119-acre piece of property. It is the last big piece of property literally at the gateway of New Smyrna in the activity center. It has not been touched other than for the fact you had an excavation on this site previously. The site itself is part of the activity center, so the idea is eventually you're going to have something on this area. But for right now, the Kitchens family were very happy with the idea of just allowing this to maintain as agriculture. The problem, of course, comes about as people get older. You're now looking at estate planning issues, and they've got to find some way of dealing with estate planning and paying for some of these issues. And so we had an option here, and that option was we don't want to sell the property, but we would consider leasing the property for an excavation process. It's one of the permitted uses. It's allowed as a permitted use under the special exceptions. And so that seemed like an idea, because that way they could be making money from the excavation during this period of time. It would have no real impact on their property because of the fact that there was already an excavation on the site. And in fact, it would have a lot of good because it could be done in the right way as opposed to the way the previous excavation was done. So in this case, we had a 7.3 acre borrow pit on the site. And the idea was, if you'll change it, to take an area, as far as you're planning, only 36 acres, add 12 more acres of borrow pit to the existing borrow pit. But do it in such a way where it's good for the city. Do it in such a way where it allows for the creation of littoral zones, creation of a lake that actually looks like a lake, creation of slopes that are appropriate as opposed to the way that they used to do borrow pits, which is straight down. And it also fulfilled a need. There is a huge need for fill in the city of New Smyrna Beach. And unfortunately, right now that need is being fulfilled by all the borrow pits to the west of the city. So you have all those trucks with fill coming out of those areas, driving down the roads for long distances, and then fulfilling the need for fill. This would have cut that travel time in half or less. As you know, there's going to be a tremendous amount of fill necessary once you look at the big project at the corner of 95 and 44 that will come up eventually. You know, we all saw the paper as far as that purchase. We know there's going to be a need for fill there. We know there's going to be a need for fill for beach restoration. We anticipate about 90% of the fill materials will go to the other side of the road or to the beach, and therefore there's not going to be a U-turn issue for this. Now, let's talk about the fact that the zoning right now is sort of unusual. You've got a comp plan that provides this as an activity center. That is a massive, intense use for this property. And that includes the borrow pit right now. You have that intensity. But you also have this as an ag use. And right now, under your ag use, you're entitled to a special exception for a borrow pit. That's an excavation, off-site excavation. It's one of the things that are allowed under a special exception. And one of the things we need to understand is the next page. This is a request for a special exception for that expansion of the borrow pit, and that's all. Now, the question is going to be, what are the conditions for that? Staff has reviewed this, as they've indicated. Staff has reviewed this and testified. And I do need to say that I'd request the staff report be entered into evidence as Exhibit A. That's the staff report of December 9th, 2019. And if it's all right, I'll provide a copy to the court reporter as Exhibit A as well. And I would also ask that a copy of the PowerPoint presentation I provided to you also be provided as an exhibit. That'll be Exhibit B, and I'll provide that to the court reporter as well. Staff has indicated that this is an appropriate use for this site and an appropriate determination for a special exception, provided they meet these conditions. As you heard in the testimony of Bryant Fields, we have agreed to meet all conditions and more. And I want to go into some of those things that we've talked about. The planning board took the staff report, listened to the hearing, we only had one person, if I remember correctly, that was concerned, and we addressed her concerns, I thought, but just to make sure, we brought a traffic engineer to make sure that we were there. But the planning board also made a recommendation of approval on this case. Now, let's go to the next one, the entitlements. So, this complies with the special exception requirement and the comprehensive plan. I think we've talked about the fact that special exception is different than a rezoning. It's different from a variance. It's different from a comp plan designation, because a special exception is a use that is shown as a permitted use under the zoning classification that we already have. And what you do is you look at that and you make a determination as to whether or not you have met the conditions. And Brian mentioned one of the conditions that we've talked about as far as the meeting the criteria, and I'll go into those as well. But when you meet those criteria, that's when you're able to grant the special exception as a permitted use. It is not a rezoning. We're not asking for rezoning. It is not a comp plan amendment. It's not a variance. It is a special exception already granted under or already listed in your permitted uses and your zoning. Based on the staff report and the compliance with the conditions, it is our belief that we have met the criteria for the zoning and the special exception, and we have met the criteria and are consistent with the comprehensive plan designations. Next one, please. So these are the conditions that you have to look at when you're looking at this and making a determination. So section 305.04C3. The requested use is listed among the special exceptions in the district for which the application is made. It is excavations allowed use if you can show compliance with the criteria outlined in section 808.05. Therefore, we go to section 808.05. 801.15. Includes several submittal requirements and criteria for excavation. Length of time in operations, buffer and setback requirements, building size requirements, additional facilities and services if proposed, slopes, no greater than 1 foot vertical drop for each 2 feet of horizontal distance for the maximum depth of excavation. Now, obviously, there's more to it than that. I mean, for instance, in the county, you also look at the idea of what's your restoration plan? How are you going to make this look better? What's your bonding? All these things that we talk about. We brought all those into this as well. But the bottom line is we met all the conditions for this special exception under this criteria and more. Now, the code goes on to talk about other things. The requested use will not impair the character of the surrounding or adjoining districts, nor be detrimental to the public health, morals, or welfare. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. This is an existing borrow pit. We are simply expanding that existing borrow pit, but we're doing it in such a way where we are actually improving the area of New Smyrna. And I'll talk about that in a second. And we're doing it by...
Hang on.
And this is partially because they don't know what is in the requirements and what we have agreed to, such as reducing density, development moratoriums, buffer areas, tree placement, all these things we're talking about that actually will in fact be good for the city of New Smyrna. So we'll talk about those as well. Plus, it's temporary. Now, the other section requires adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, sanitation, or other necessary services or facility will be available or provided. Well, obviously, I'm digging a lake. I don't need utilities. I'm not building an apartment complex, although under the activity center I could. I'm not building a subdivision, although under the activity center I could. I'm not building an industrial center, although under the activity center I could. None of those things are required. I have met the criteria for this. I've met all the criteria for the utilities. So, although they're available, I don't need them. FDIT has determined that site access would be best from the closed gas station sites. Traffic impacts will be minimal. That is DOT's determination. Now, And we're going to talk about this in a second, because I've also got my traffic engineer that will come in and testify. But I want to let you know, we listened to the city as far as the idea of a traffic signal at Sugar Mill. As you know, there's already an existing traffic signal at Sugar Mill. This seems easy. This would be great if I thought about it for the kitchens, because we put a traffic signal there. This would make it easier for the development of the future sites. DOT, and again, so we took that to DOT and said, we're okay with it. We're okay with what the city wants. DOT said that would not be safe for this particular site and for this temporary use, because what that would do is actually slow traffic on 44, because you'd have another round of signals at that location, and it would slow traffic on 44, and they did not want to do that. What they saw as a better and safer alternative was to come out at the Shell station, what used to be the Shell station, I'm sorry, the gas station, and because of the fact you're only looking at potentially 40 to 70 cars per day, 40 to 70 trucks per day, which literally, yeah, I can understand.
If I may. So, again, I get it, you're passionate about it, you care about it, you're hearing stuff you agree or disagree with, but we got to be able to conduct this in a professional manner. If we can't, we'll have to do something different. So, let's let him finish. You're going to have a chance to speak, those of you that desire, so we got to keep it that way, folks. Thank you.
And I appreciate that, but I understand, when you say 40, 70 trucks, it sounds like a lot. You heard the testimony of staff. There are 35,000 trips per day on this area. So you're looking at adding 40 to 70 trips per day. It is really insignificant, and again, that's the thing. 40 trips per day is the same as 4 houses. That's what you're looking at, 4 residential homes. So the amount of trips is really insignificant compared to what could be there and what is already there. That's the point. And so DOT made the determination they did not want another signal at that location. They prefer to do it this way because especially with the fact that we had control over the trucks. I mean, it's not like they were going to jump out. You had a signal at the interstate. There's a gap there. It would be very easy for the trucks to go during the gaps. Again, you're looking at 1 or 2. So very, this is over the entire day, by the way. So they weren't looking at that many trucks. And they were not looking at it as a problem. They looked at it as a safety issue. From their standpoint, it was far safer to look at this way. If you want to put a condition in that we're required to put a signal there, go for it. We don't have a problem with it because we were going to support it regardless. But this is a DOT state highway. They have control over it, and it's their jurisdiction. Next one, please. All right, thank you. You're good. So again, this meets the conditions and goals of the comprehensive plan, even though the comprehensive plan provides that I'm entitled to up to 18 dwelling units per acre and up to 60 transient units per acre. Transient units are hotel rooms. So that's what's entitled on this site under the comp plan. And that's one of the things that we were looking at as far as how to look at this for the future. So, but your comp plan also provides that because of the fact this is an ag use, even though it has that comp plan designation, your comp plan says you should allow for a reasonable interim use of existing agricultural land by maintaining the agricultural zoning classification on parcels designated for high-intensity lands on the future land use map until such time as that development is proposed. So that's what we're doing. We're keeping this, an excavation as ag use. We're keeping it as an ag use during this period of time, and then we'll talk about how we're doing that by conditions. All right, next one. So this is sort of interesting, and the fact that the kitchens agreed to this shows you where their heart is. The bottom line is there is a development moratorium, or there would be a development moratorium on the entire 119 acres during the entire time that this property is under an excavation. So if that's a 2 to 5 year time period, the St. John's permit is typically 5 years. During that time, there would be no development on this site whatsoever. When I see people send out emails saying, oh, we understand the idea is that they're going to take this site, they're going to dig this out, and then they're going to fill it back up and put houses on it. First of all, who would do that? But more importantly, the fact is, no. The idea is to not do that. The idea is to provide for a development moratorium during this period of time. That is an advantage at this point with New Smyrna because you're trying to deal with all these other issues. You're entitled to it, but they would hold off on that. By the way, that was a stipulation that was not mandated by the staff, and so there would be no taking. So I want to make clear on that, and I want to make clear on the record. Secondly, there was a reduction of density and intensity. The applicant offered to reduce the density and intensity that would be allowed on this 119 acres by the area that was contained within the borrow pits. Right now, the borrow pit that we have, because it was a manufactured as opposed to a natural lake, I'm entitled to use that for my density calculations. But we would take the entire 18 acres of borrow pit, and we would remove that from the calculations that you'd be entitled to have. Now remember, you guys have already removed a lot of density off of this site and off the rest of New Smyrna. When you took density off of wetlands and other things, you removed about a third of the density entitlements on this site already. So what we were looking at doing on this case is, by doing that, it would be 18 acres times 18 units per acre. So we would be removing 324 units removed from the site for multifamily. Or 18 units by 60 hotel units, that's 1,080 hotel units that we'd be removing from the site as a stipulation. That was part of the conditions, that was part of the stipulations. That's why I thought this was a good thing for the city as well as everyone else. And by the way, again, I need to put for the record, that was a stipulation on our part. It was not mandated by staff, and therefore it is not a taking. So I thought it was important to do that as part of the overall thoughts. Thirdly, one of the other things we were doing, and we stipulated to, again, these are not necessarily conditions, but these are stipulations. We stipulated that we would demolish the existing gas station. As you know, the gas station has been there, sitting up there for a while. It's allowed to be there. It's a, existing building. But it was creating, it's not the gateway that the city of New Smyrna would like to have. And so what we thought we would do is help create the gateway that New Smyrna wanted. And so we would take that down. We would create vegetated buffers along that area of the Shell station, and vegetated buffers all along this area as well. In fact, what we would do, if you notice that the plan, was to take the existing borrow pit and move it back so that we have more room for vegetated buffers and more room for the frontage. You won't even see any of the things taking place at that borrow pit during this period of time. There's nothing you can see. Partially because this is some of the things that we've worked out with staff. I've got to tell you, staff has been great as far as suggestions, as far as things that we can do to make this a better project. And this was a better project because now you'll have a real gateway. In fact, I will tell you, one of the things we had suggested was the idea of putting a fountain in the lake. But now, because of the fact that that lake is going to be so far back, you're not going to be able to see the fountain, so what's the point of it? So the idea now is to have a vegetated buffer all along this area so your gateway is similar to what we've talked about. I heard somebody who said that they were concerned that we were taking trees out and that this was some kind of another developer taking trees out. Well, first of all, the Kitchens family have taken no trees out. This is a pasture. And in fact, of all locations for a borrow pit where you don't have a tree impact, an existing pasture is the absolute best possibility. So instead of taking trees out, what we're going to be doing is putting trees in. We're going to be creating a lake with littoral shelves, and then putting trees all along the frontage of 44 so that you'll have a real gateway, and taking out a dilapidated building at the same time. I thought it was a good thing. Again, for Carrie's sake, this was stipulated, not mandated, therefore no taking. We're not knocking the building down because you required it. We offered to do that. So, all right, next one. There's also environmental improvement on this site, and I think that's important to bring up. Someone was concerned, I know that I saw some of the emails that said that we were taking out wetlands and this is a terrible thing. No. First of all, when you do excavations, St. John's won't allow you to take out wetlands. They want you to have a wetland buffer, as a matter of fact, from any wetlands away. So these are areas that are all pasture land. There's no wetlands that will be destroyed, but new wetland habitat will be created. Because right now you've got the existing borrow pits like they used to do, just basically giant holes in the ground straight down. The new borrow pits that are created, when they're done correctly and with the restoration required, have littoral shelves. So what you have instead is you have a gentle slope, you have a littoral shelf all along the areas of the lake, so that you have vegetation that is then, by the way, planted as part of your restoration plan, so that you really have a new wetland habitat created in that area next to your lake. That's the way it should be. And that's the way we were proposing to do it. Again, one of the things the staff wanted to make sure of is that we do this in a manner where it looks like a lake, where it's rounded and as opposed to the borrow pits in the past. So that's what this would look like. It would look like a lake that's been there for generations once we were done with it. And by the way, I should point out, it's important for people to understand that the promises that are made on things like this have to be kept, because one of the requirements is, although not necessarily in your existing ordinance, but because of the stipulations, is to have a bond. We are required to bond this to make sure that all the restoration, all the replanting, all the littoral shelves, everything we talk about is bonded so that someone else, so the city can go ahead and do it if we don't do it. We've also, someone was concerned about noise. There's dewatering pumps that would basically have no noise. They have noise protections. I had some excavation out west. You could be right on the site and you wouldn't hear it. It was, in fact, we had a party there one time and asked the neighbors if they heard it, and no, they didn't, and it was running. So the technology is changed. It's much better now. One of the things I want to talk about as far as the environmental improvements is how this operation is actually done. Lawson, is Lawson here? No? Okay. Oh, he is here. Okay. One of the ways this is done now is in a way where you don't have the old stockpiles of fill material. Lawson, I wonder if you could explain how an excavation now is done.
Sure, there's
Hey, we got to get sworn in real quick.
Please state your name.
Lawson Lamar.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Are we stipulating as an expert witness, Glenn, or do you want to go through credentials, or?
Why don't you go ahead and explain your credentials and what you do?
I'm a graduate from the University of Florida School of Building Construction. Been in civil and vertical construction for the last 17 years and have operated several borrow pits around the Central Florida area. We've got about 6 active now. Last year we moved quite a bit of material. This particular borrow pit and the way that we dewater.
So, hang on, let me just check out a few boxes here real quick. So any member of the commission or audience was, audience or commission was to question him on his professional qualifications. If not, any objections to qualifying him as an expert witness in this area? Being no objections, he's determined to be an area of expert witness. Please continue.
The way that we dewater these days isn't with a rim ditch and with stockpiles above ground. We're putting sock into the ground, or pipe, perforated pipe rather, with sock over it, and we extract the water and it comes out.
You need to explain what a sock is.
Okay, I am. It's a perforated pipe that goes around the perimeter of the excavation, and it sucks the water in from beneath the ground, so you're actually drawing out the dirt in place. You're not removing it, piling it, handling it again, and then loading on a truck. It's a small operation that typically consists of an excavator, a loader, an agricultural tractor, and The truck just comes in, the material comes straight out of the ground onto the truck, and it leaves the site. So there aren't any unsightly stockpiles. There's not an area that's devegetated prior to the excavation, so there's no dust issues, and we have a stabilized road out to the road, and it's maintained with water.
And I need to focus on this. The citizens of Sugar Mill had to deal with a lot of dust issues from another development. Can you tell me how you deal with those issues?
Sure. So I'd mentioned that we don't strip the site in advance like you'd see in a neighborhood or a subdivision. It's a small, precise operation that moves throughout the excavation area, and you're stabilizing as you finish an area. The dirt's coming straight out on the ground and onto the truck, and you don't have any dust issues.
Thank you. Any questions, Flossin? Okay.
Questions?
Nope. Randy?
I'll get it later.
Okay. And he's gonna stick around. Okay. But it's one of the things that was important to us because, like I say, when you're dealing with this, the idea is no one even knows you're there. We'll be far enough back behind the buffer, no one will know we're there. We'll get to the point where we have no noise whatsoever, no one will know we're there. And the important thing is the way this is done, there'll be no dust, no debris flowing or anything else. And these trucks actually will go into the pit itself to get loaded and then go out again. So there's nothing you can even see above ground. That's the nice thing about it. All right. Obviously, one of the things I wanted to stress, and for the sake of the record, is that this also will require a St. John's Water Management District permit. St. John's also looks at whether or not the dewatering causes any impact to the water table, to the wetland areas, and you are required to, of course, not have any impact to the water table or to the wetland areas. And that's how one of the things they've done. They typically require monitoring, wetland monitoring during this period of time to make sure of that. And they will shut you down if there's an issue. All right, next one. So one of the criteria for this is a city Class 2 site plan, which shows all of the details, all the requirements we've talked about, that we have to meet all the conditions and show how we've met all the conditions. Again, I heard the fact that the City Commission is concerned that this is something that they want to keep an eye on. We would have no objection to the City Commission, or to the site plan review coming before the City Commission as a stipulation, if that would be appropriate. I think we've talked about this already. The next one, which is trees. Again, this area is almost entirely pasture. We're not really taking out any trees. There may be a couple stragglers here, pine trees or something, but as a general, we're not taking any trees. What we are doing is putting trees in, and putting significant amount of trees into the buffer area. Again, a restoration bond is provided for all the trees, for everything we've talked about. But more importantly, again, when this thing is done and you have the planting material on that littoral shelf, this will be something really nice. Visual impacts. We talked about the fact that there'll be no material stockpiling on the site. You won't be able to see this. Again, you won't be able to see this site from State Road 44, and you won't be able to see the gas station anymore. So wouldn't that be a nice thing to say? Perimeter landscape buffers are provided. We're going to also do there are different sizes for those. There's a 50-foot buffer along State Road 44 of vegetation, and then there's a 25-foot buffer along the gas station site. So that'll all be planted 25 feet into there. Right now, as you probably know, there's nothing there. There may be one palm tree left, if I remember correctly, but there's nothing there. This will actually provide a vegetative buffer and landscape buffer along the entrance to the gateway. Now, let's talk about traffic. Okay? This is important because, again, I can see the way that Commissioner McGurk reacted to the idea of the traffic coming in here. I think that's very important. And again, the only real question that we had at the planning board was really regarding traffic. You know, how is this going to work, and is this going to cause a problem? I understand that the sugar mill, the lady from Sugar Mill that was there, was concerned about the U-turns. Again, chances are, based on where this fill is going, you're going to have very, very few U-turns, if at all. But the bottom line is, this is something that's very important. One of the things we agreed to, I think, at the planning board, but was that there would be no weekend excavations as well, because again, the last thing you want to do is to have any conflict with our major traffic days, and as you know, Saturday and Sunday are our major traffic days. So we shut down the project on the weekends, and I think on holidays, is that correct? Yes, and on holidays as well, so that we alleviate any conflicts with those traffic areas. In addition, next one, and this is something we agreed to, just to make sure this traffic operation is working, staff has instituted an opportunity to review, require the payment for that review, and to make sure it's working or to make any changes if necessary, if it's not working. So within the first 12 months of operation of the borrow pit, upon request by the city, the applicant shall have a traffic operations review performed by a licensed professional traffic engineer. The traffic operations review shall evaluate any traffic operational concerns related to the borrow pit operation as determined by the city. Any concerns at all that you have, or your staff has, or residents have, would have to be evaluated at that time. With reasonable corrective actions implemented as needed in order to continue the borrow pit operations. If you didn't have a way to correct the problem, the borrow pit operations would stop. So that's one of the reasons. That's one of the ways we dealt with this, and that's one of the ways we work with staff to solve that problem. This corrective operations could include relocation of the borrow pit site access and or travel patterns. Any corrective actions involving access to State Road 44 shall require the applicant to seek DOT permitting and approval. Again, I know the staff would like to see something different or was concerned about something different. We have an operation, we have a mechanism now to provide for that if there is a problem. DOT has assured us there's no problem. You've seen that. You've seen their email, but we're okay. We have no problem with looking at this at any time during that first 12 months. The operating days for the borrow pit shall be Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. with only maintenance permitted on the weekends. We can come in and somebody can fix a tractor, but that's as far as it goes. The truck traffic will vary from 25 to 75 daily trips with an average of 40 per day. This is based on our experience. Again, the fill material necessary for the project across the street from State Road 44 and Beach Renourishment. 90% of the fill material is anticipated to go across the street or east to the Beach Renourishment sites. Again, if we don't do this site, that fill material is still coming. That traffic is still on that road. You're still making those turning movements. You're doing everything that you would do otherwise, only on a lot longer distance of roads. Per the FDOT, the current left turn at Sugar Mill has adequate length of queue storage to support a U-turn maneuver or traffic generated from their project. We understand this project would be a temporary project until the excavation is completed. Again, we can put timelines on there if that would be appropriate. We're open to that. We brought our traffic engineer, Sands Lassiter, here tonight. And Sands, could you come up? I need you to explain what your findings are on this site, how we're dealing with it, what the options are, and whether or not this causes any major traffic impacts whatsoever at State Road 44 or Sugar.
Okay, thank you.
Please state your name.
So Robert Sands Lassiter.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you'd state your educational and professional background, please.
I have an electrical engineering degree from University of Florida, followed by a master's degree in civil engineering from University of Florida. I am a registered professional engineer, and I've been doing this, working in this field for 41 years.
Okay, does any member of the audience or commission wish to question the gentleman on his professional qualifications? Hearing none, any objections to qualifying him as an expert witness in this area? No objections. He's determined to be an expert witness. Please continue.
Thank you. I think the key concern that I would have as a traffic engineer is the issue of loaded trucks moving out onto the road and crossing 2 lanes of traffic to get into a left turn lane to perform a U-turn. And it's an obvious situation. I think any driver would see the same thing. We have here an upstream traffic signal which will create gaps in the traffic flow, and that's what really makes this work, honestly. That's what makes it work. That's why DOT has gone ahead and approved this without additional signalized access at Sugar Mill, which it wouldn't warrant, but which they believe is safe, and I believe is safe, occurring at the exit to the driveway, because we're talking about using the 2 driveways, the eastern and the western driveways at the older gas station. Use the western driveway as inbound, the eastern driveway as outbound. You have plenty of room to move across into that lane with the gaps that will be available. And just to let you know, given a typical day of operation, the planned traffic exiting the site, we're talking about 1 truck leaving the site every 7 minutes. Okay, now it takes a while to load these trucks, get them in position, load them, then for them to leave the site. But this type of loading operation is 1 leaving the site every 7 minutes. This will not create a traffic issue. With the help of the upstream traffic signal creating the gaps, that will not be a problem. But I think the biggest impact of this proposal, quite frankly, is taking an additional 10.7 acres out of the picture of future development. And this traffic from this project goes away when this operation, this ball pit operation shuts down. In all, by spreading the entitlements of the entire 18 acres, is actually taking 18 acres of land off the inventory that could otherwise be generating traffic, and quite frankly, commercial traffic. Commercial traffic is allowed here. You can get 10,000 square feet per acre on this site. You can get 107,000 square feet off just the 10.7 acres that are being taken off the inventory. So what, to me, the real value to this proposal is, quite frankly, the amount of traffic it'll keep off the road in perpetuity. So to me, that was the biggest value. Not only does it not create a problem in the short term, but in the long term, it's keeping a lot of traffic out of this very busy interchange.
I've got to ask a question. For the record, is there any doubt in your mind that the plan as proposed is safe from a traffic standpoint?
None whatsoever. These are commercial drivers. They have commercial driver's license. They are heavily regulated. They know how to handle these trucks in traffic. And again, if it weren't for that upstream signal, I would not be of the same opinion. But we have that signal upstream, and it does create those gaps and allows that traffic to safely move across.
Any questions by the commission of this witness? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Question.
Vice Mayor.
Did you perform any traffic counts out there?
No, we had the same counts everyone else has, with the mid-30s being the traffic per day, trips per day on State Road 44. We're out here on this area of roadway doing studies day in, day out. These DOT counts are good.
I'm more concerned with the turning movement that there is, going eastbound on 44, turning onto Sugar Mill, the one that would be used by most of these vehicles if they're going across the highway.
And quite frankly, that's why such a long turn lane was installed, was because of the queues that occur there and are anticipated to occur there. When we actually design those turn lanes, we do it in advance of the need, and we do it with a projected additional growth in the future. So DOT's looked at this, we've looked at this, we know that intersection is set up to handle this additional traffic. Again, it's because it's a small amount of traffic.
Does the signal that is west of the project, does that control traffic exiting northbound off of 95?
No, that traffic has to yield. That traffic has to yield.
It has to yield onto 44.
That's correct. So there will be some northbound right turns, which is not the heavy volume at the interchange, but there will be some northbound right turns that are released outside of signal control. But there are plenty of gaps out here to handle this. The volume of traffic we have out here, the amount of traffic being proposed is this site, in my professional opinion, there will be no issues from a capacity standpoint.
So if I gather what you're saying correctly, because the entrance and exit from the site is considerably west of the intersection, that provides enough space for a vehicle to go across.
Yes, sir.
What would happen if the entrance and exit was moved to the east? Not to the intersection, but to
Yeah,
the
but,
east.
well, the longer distance you've got to make that weave maneuver, the better. And that's one of the criteria for a successful weave. It's actually three items. It's the traffic cutting across, it's the through traffic, it's the number of lanes, and it's the distance. I guess that's four items. So you have to take all those into account and looking at a weave. In this case, we've got gaps created by the upstream signal.
Did you prepare a report on this?
No, sir.
After the borrow pit, if it's approved, is constructed, the entrance and egress would be removed?
I don't know the answer to that.
Let me phrase it another way. Would the entrance and, would that be capable of handling any future development? In all likelihood?
Well, yes. But my assumption is with the frontage along this and the amount of traffic that could still be developed eventually, is that access to Sugar Mill would be warranted at some point, and that's where the access would occur.
In other words, that would be similar to the development that occurred west of 95, eastbound into New Smyrna, where the Raceway gas station is, and they have installed double lane ingress and egress to that traffic light in anticipation of the future development.
Correct, and even though the side street demand might not need dual lefts there, or the dual lanes, it's a good idea to add them because the more queuing lanes you have on the side street, the less green time you're taking away from State Road 44, and it's that green time on State Road 44 that we want to preserve.
If the applicant was willing to fund such an entrance at Sugar Mill, not a question for you, more to the attorney, would they be agreeable to pay for that?
I can explain it. Again, we talked about that. In fact, we had agreed with the staff's idea of providing the access at Sugar Mill. And so that would have required something. But you're right. I mean, down the road, we're going to be designing this thing. The question is how soon down the road? With this proposal, that would be at least 5 years down the road. If not, you're looking at potentially sooner, and we'd have to look at those issues. But the bottom line is, yes, we will have to design all those things around traffic. And you're probably looking at a side corridor. You probably will not use necessarily the same access as the gas station now. I think you'd look at something different if you're looking at the entirety of the project.
I like to look ahead.
I appreciate that.
Any other questions for the previous witness? I think you've got a few more slides.
Just a couple.
But any questions for the previous witness? All right.
Yes, Mr.
Gentlemen.
Mayor. For Mr. Lassiter, thank you. You know, I'm somewhat familiar with your work and highly value your expertise. I'm dismayed that you, as well as staff, if I'm correct, have not completed an official traffic impact analysis when we have the possibility of 75 trucks per day at 7-minute intervals and no official TIA has been done?
That's really easy to respond to. There's a threshold for conducting traffic studies. It's 1,000 trips a day or 100 trips in the PM peak hour. We're generating 9 trips in the PM peak hour. We're generating as maximum for 75 trucks on a daily basis. These do not meet the threshold, and I will tell you as an engineer, there are some things that you can tell just will simply work. And again, I've been doing this for 40 years. You're adding 1,000 trips out there a day, certainly there's a traffic study that needs to be done because you've got to look at all the movements in all the directions. But with just 7 exiting this, or 9, I think, exiting this in the peak hour, You do not have the kind of volumes that you can even measure. You can't even measure the change in impact in traffic, such a small number. And that's why. It's not that we were negligent, it's just that you really can't tell the difference. You can add 9 trips to an analysis of an intersection and not see anything but like at the 6th or 7th decimal level. You do see a change, but it's so infinitesimally small that it's not valid in terms of considering in terms of impacts.
And that's your reasoning for looking at it 12 months down the line?
It's not 12 months. I can go to that for a second. In fact, why don't you stay here for a second? The condition is, and it was a condition that was approved by, or agreed to by the planning board and by the staff, is that any time within that 12 months, the staff is able to say, hey, we want you to look at this. And at that point, we'd have to bring in our traffic engineer and do an analysis at that time to determine what the issues are and what the corrective measures would be. So it was an insurance policy is basically what it was. If we're not right, if there is by chance some impact, if DOT was wrong, then we want to look at it. And we want to take corrective action, and we will bring SANS in. But as he said, the problem is it's so small, so tiny right now, there was no basis for bringing SANS into this process until the planning board raised the issue and until we talked about the the study within 12 months. But again, we have no problem with that. We agreed to it, and we're ready to work together to solve that problem.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for this witness? If not, if you would.
Yes, thank you. Stan, I did have one more question. I'm sorry. You're talking about 30,000 plus or thereabouts as far as trips in this area? 35,000. Is that weekday or is that weekend?
You want to hear some real engineering speak? That's average annual weekday daily traffic, okay? So what we do is we take traffic numbers, we count them several times through the year, and we have a way of producing a reasonably high average. And we actually can show you a peak season. We can show you an off-peak season. We have traffic numbers for every case, but DOT has selected the average weekday daily traffic counts as the measure for which we design traffic signals, for which we design pavement, for which we do traffic studies themselves. So it's supposed to be weekday, not weekend. So it's weekday.
Okay, thank you.
Now,
Question, go ahead.
So that raised another question, because there was concern about the damage would be done to the roadway itself. So that has also been taken into consideration by DOT.
absolutely. Trucks create the most damage on the roads. Cars, thousands of cars will equal the damage of one truck, okay? And that's just how it goes. Roads are not designed for cars, they're designed for trucks. The loading is for what the trucks require. There's a very high truck percentage used in the design of State Road 44 and of the pavement that exists out there on State Road 44. The number of trucks we're talking about adding to it is infinitesimally small. So will it have an impact? Yes. Will it have an impact that pushes it over the design levels? Not at all.
But in the event there could be or would be some damage, who would be responsible for those repairs?
Especially, obviously the damage, if it's going to happen at all, is going to be at the entrances.
Right.
Or the exits. We would be responsible for that damage. And I will tell you something else, but don't forget, all the trucks that are going to be on this road, regardless of whether we're there or whether they get the fill from somewhere else, that damage we'll have nothing to do with. So, but
Okay.
as far as this site and the entrance to this road, you betcha, we'd be responsible for it, and DOT will make us be responsible for it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions for this witness? If not, Mr. Storch, if you
Thank you, Sands.
continue.
And again, our goal is to work together to solve a problem. And I think you can tell that some of the things we've done is to try to solve problems that exist already. The fact that there's a need for fill is one problem. The fact that we've tried to enhance the gateway into New Smyrna is another problem. The fact that we've tried to reduce the density is another problem we've tried to deal with. But there are misunderstandings out there, and that's, again, one of the reasons why I was suggesting it might be good to sit and meet with everyone. Because sometimes you can craft conditions to deal with concerns. That's not a problem. Just like you've talked about today. If you're concerned with the site plan, we can bring it back to you. So one of the misunderstandings, and let's go to the process. Let's go to the next one. There we go. I thought this was interesting. The reality is that city staff is so overwhelmed with all the growth in New Smyrna Beach, they will not be able to keep on top of these restrictions. We lived with the Coastal Woods disaster, and they broke the rules right and left. The same will happen with the pit. It's inevitable. That's not true. And the reason for it is because, A, we've learned some lessons, and B, this is a different issue. Coastal Woods had some different ag classifications that they were able to exploit, okay, when they were doing the things they did. We have looked at this. We have worked with staff on this. There are requirements that will keep us in check to make sure that we do everything we've talked about. And more importantly, all the things we've talked about must be done prior to us digging a single shovelful of dirt. That makes a difference. We have to put a bond up to make sure that we restore it after we're done. That makes a difference. So, and hopefully, I would like to think that we're good citizens as well. And more importantly, the kitchen's desire is not to develop this property right now. That's important. So those are things we can talk about. If your goal is to encourage the development of the property, we can talk about that. But if your goal is to keep this property at a development moratorium for a long period of time, this is an opportunity to look at that option. So that's a misunderstanding. The other misunderstanding, of course, is that we talked about this before, that the pit will be filled in for a future housing development. Of course not. That's not going to happen. This is going to be a lake. It would be mandated to be a lake. We would put a conservation easement over it once it's a lake. These are things that we're going to be looking at as far as how this can be done properly. And then down the road, maybe Mrs. Kitchen's children, maybe her grandchildren, may look at doing something down the road and planning for the future, as Commissioner Claudius talked about, which is what we do need to do. The bottom line, as far as inclusion, is pretty simple. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan, the use that we're proposing. The special exception is permitted pursuant to city zoning and LDR conditions. We've met all the conditions. The testimony is we've met and agreed to all the conditions. And if you have additional conditions, we have a very willing and able group to work with you on this and to work with the citizens on this. The applicant has stipulated a number of conditions that will reduce density and intensity of that site. They'll provide a development moratorium on the site. They'll provide improvements to the gateway of New Smyrna Beach. They'll provide environmental improvements to the site and to the lake itself. There's a mechanism to minimize traffic impacts and to review this immediately if necessary, if there's a problem on day one. And the staff and planning board have recommended approval. And that's my presentation, and we're all available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Does any member of the commission wish to question the applicant or on their testimony? Commissioner, Vice Mayor.
I have one question that perhaps could be answered best by you. It's a conditional use.
Yes.
In this zone.
That's correct.
Gas station's in a B3 zone.
The gas station is not part of the use that's being applied for. The area that's being applied for the special exception is only the ag area.
So you're not going to use the gas station property at all?
That's correct. Well, the gas station is an access point. There'll be an
So you're using it?
There'll be an easement over the gas station property. But if you see the better approach as putting it at a different location, that's something we can look at.
Well, I've alluded to that. That would be at the intersection itself. And my concern is that if it cannot be done in that zone and you move it farther to the east, would there be enough room to transfer your traffic over to the median and turn around?
Sands?
I don't think that question could be answered.
Okay.
Because we don't know how far that would be.
Right,
and
right.
we haven't done a detailed study, detailed counts, and all that other thing.
The fact is, I mean, the fact that we were able to take the gas station down was a good thing.
My wife loves it, yes.
And the fact that we were able to get an easement across the gas station property for the access was a good thing. So that's how we dealt with it. It's not part of the zoning itself. There'll be an easement across the gas station property to allow for this.
Well, I'm not an attorney, so I neither agree or disagree with you
I understand.
at this point, but it's an issue that I would like to have addressed.
And we'd be willing to look at that.
And I know that this has been brought up very late, but it's an answer that I would have to have
That's fair.
at this point.
Again, as far as I'm concerned, we're willing to work with anybody and everyone to try to answer questions and try to make this the best project possible.
Okay. I have a number of things, but the main issue I have on it is the environmental effect that the dewatering is going to have. Because you're taking a water table down 30 feet or so, and I know you have schematics on the plan as how you will recharge that water into the, into the wetlands. But the wetlands are so extensive out there, and there are a series of ditches that interconnect these wetlands. And I haven't heard any professional testimony that tells me that that can be done. And if there are special conditions, whether it has to be injection wells or whatever to get the groundwater back to where it is right now, I haven't heard that yet.
Sure.
So if you would just introduce yourself real quick.
Yes. For the record, Mark Watts with the law firm of Cobb Cole, 231 North Woodland Boulevard, DeLand.
And to explain to the audience, you've heard me swear in some folks and not others, just for clarity. Attorneys do not have to be sworn in. Their oath of whatever it is that they take, bar, something. I didn't write the rules. They just tell me
That's right.
what the rules are. So that's why you don't hear me swearing some in and others we do. So just so we have clarity, but with that, thank you.
And let me clarify, I'm not an environmental engineer, Mr. Claudy, but we've worked with this, and we've worked with this not only on this site, but other sites. So let me try and answer your question. In particular, I think the concern we've heard before and in our discussions with staff was whether or not the drawdown creates any impacts for the wetland areas. We did a couple things to make sure we were addressing that. Number one, we agreed that we would maintain the minimum 50-foot setback from the wetland areas from where any excavating activity was happening. But more importantly, Lawson Lamar mentioned to you the way in which the dewatering occurs with the sock that's kind of pulling water out of discrete areas. That water doesn't leave the site. And if you look at the schematics that are included in your materials, they're also the schematics that have been filed with the Water Management District and would be required to come back through for review and approval as part of the site plan review process here. The water that's pulled out is actually discharged into recharge trenches that kind of surround the edges of the wetland areas. In other words, you're pulling it out and you're rehydrating right back into the same area. So you're not removing that water from the site. You're putting it back into recharge trenches that keep the wetland areas intact and keep them from having an adverse impact as a result of the dewatering. Now, one thing that's all well and good. One thing that I think there's some concern about is you've got a lot of those things that are conditions of the St. Johns River Water Management District permits. An additional thing that we agreed to and we offered up as a stipulation here was that not only would we, obviously we have a legal duty to comply with the Water Management District permits, the city typically doesn't have any involvement there. And so what we offered, and it's included in your conditions, is that the Water Management District permits themselves are a condition of the special exception. Meaning that if there's a violation, if the Water Management District permit were in violation, if there was an expired permit or a permit that was otherwise not an active permit or that we were not complying with, that stipulation creates enforcement authority to the city. So you wouldn't have to, I think you've had other instances where there's a Water Management District permit that was allowing something to occur and you weren't able to do anything about it. We knew that was a prior condition you've dealt with, so we added that as a stipulation here, that if there's a Water Management District concern on the consumptive use permit side or on the environmental resource permit side, that condition creates enforcement authority to the city. And I think we've got our engineer here. I may have butchered.
Right. What I'm hoping is we do have an engineer here who would hopefully testify that what Mark said is correct.
If you give be sworn in.
Please state your name.
John Smith?
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
If you would state your educational professional background, sir.
I have a master's degree in environmental engineering from Drexel University in Philadelphia. I have over 40 years' experience as a civil environmental engineer.
Thank you. Does any member of the audience or commission wish to question him on his professional qualifications? Hearing no objections, any objections qualifying him? Hearing no objections, you're qualified as an expert witness. Please give your testimony.
We've done this in many situations where we've recharged the wetlands from a recharge trench outside of the excavation pit. And actually, it's bad for the excavator because he has to pump more water, get circulated back in. It's like a circulation process, but it doesn't draw down the water from a great distance. Number two is that this is the shallow water table aquifer. So just by nature of groundwater pumping, the drawdown effect is closer to the well or to the excavation than it would be in a deep groundwater aquifer. That's when you have a drawdown from massive areas. So generally, a drawdown effect might be 500 to 1,000 feet before you even see a small drawdown.
Okay.
Well, I'm not concerned with deep drawdown. I'm concerned with, even though you have a 50-foot buffer around the wetlands, which I believe I have requested, you're still drawing down 30 feet, 50 feet away. So, as you said, you're going to be recycling a lot of water, which will have an effect on the wetlands. And also, on this tract, that's not the only wetlands. There's a number of other wetlands, and they're all interconnected by ditches. And has anybody looked into that effect? In fact, one of the ditches is going to be removed because you're excavating it. So it's a complicated environmental condition right now. In fact, in the environmentalist report, did you prepare that?
No.
Okay. In that report, they state that in all likelihood, there's going to be significantly more wetlands on the property because of hydric soils and the fact it was pasture. So I really feel in this case, you need to have a detailed study. And being this is a special exception, I would like to see that first. Now, St. John's Water Management, do you have their permit?
We have a CUP and an ERP permit, yes. The CUP covers the groundwater pumping.
Okay. And they looked into the recharge for the wetlands?
Yes, they did.
Has that been provided to us?
The permit? I don't know if the permit's been provided.
Permits with their conditions?
Brian said no.
No.
That permit is typically part of the site plan review process, and that's when it's provided. Obviously, if it was asked for, we would provide it, and we'll provide it now if we'd like. I wonder if we could take just a very quick break to allow the stenographer. This is very important questions on line of questioning. Can we take a quick break to allow her to plug into a unit so we don't
Battery source.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll stay together. Just do what you got to do. Nobody talk for a second. So she can capture everything. Is there a plug nearby? Did you find a plug?
Russ, I'm going to go over for a while, so it's fine by me if other commissioners chime in.
Yeah, let's go down the line. Yeah. Okay. To order. Again, appreciate your observation. We have to have order so we can hear the questions, so the stenographer can record it, so we can hear each other. So thank you for your patience.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd appreciate if some other commissioners could chime in if they have something to say, so I can keep my thoughts in order.
All right. Any other, so really we're questions of the applicant, so any other questions of the applicant from the City Commission at this time? I would say that the next item up, I know Vice Mayor has more questions. The next item up is members of the public that would wish to speak on this. I felt like if we shared some of our thoughts, it might help the public know where we're at, but I'll defer to my commission on how you'd like to do that. Sorry, can you hear me now? No, still not? Still can't hear me. Can you hear me now? I feel like I'm yelling into this microphone, but I will continue to yell into the microphone. Still can't hear me? All right.
And by the way, Mr. Mayor, I have to tell you, first of all, thank you for the time to allow that change. But also, I want to thank the audience for the decorum they've shown during this entire thing. It's wonderful, and if you want us to, anytime they have any questions, we're available for any questions as well.
Okay. Does any members of the commission have questions for the applicant?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Make sure to eat that mic.
Can you hear me all?
You gotta yell.
All right, for the applicant, I am very unsure that you can provide for the safety and health, safety and welfare, I said that twice, safety, for good measure, of this project. You are artificially recreating wetland, lowland on this area. So basically, you are changing the hydrology of this area, possibly for thousands of feet around. Changing the aquifer, changing the superficial water, possibly introducing volatile organic compounds, basically gasoline, lubricants, will leak. I don't know how you can mitigate that. Gentlemen, it is a change of epic proportion that you're doing to this region and affecting our water quality for our citizens necessary for sustainability.
Yeah, that wasn't the testimony. The testimony was the exact opposite, that it would have no impact as a result of this. But I should point out that one of the things it does do, as far as wetlands, it does create wetland habitat that is not there now. I want to make clear, and I know that Commissioner Cloudy had a question on this. Although there were wetlands on the site, on the 119-acre site, there are no wetlands impacted by this proposed area. We're not doing that. We're doing it in the pasture areas, not anything in the wetland areas, and then we're creating wetlands. So we're increasing the habitat, and that's usually a good thing.
Those wetlands you're creating are seasonal, are they not? Now you're going to introduce water artificially.
No, the water tables, if you look at, well, first of all, there's an existing lake now. There's an existing borrow pit and an existing lake now. It will go up to the same level as that existing lake. But instead of how it is right now, you'll have littoral shelves and vegetation along those littoral shelves. That's what you're creating.
No, I understand that part.
Okay.
But possibly 5 years of work on this area will significantly change the water table. It will take a very long time to bring it back to equilibrium. And who knows what will happen to the quality of the water after you're done. Just my personal comment.
And I appreciate that. I just have to go by the evidence.
Yeah. Okay. All right, now I feel like I'm really loud out there. Can you hear me now? All right. Good job, kid. Okay, we will now, let's do this. Want to hear from members of the public wishing to testify. Do you want to make more comments now or after the public?
I can wait.
All right. We're gonna close it all out once we get to it. So, and I'd like to do that before I retire. Okay. We'll now hear from members of the public. We're going to start with those who wish to testify in favor of this special exception. You're going to have to, that part may be quick, I got it. So For both of them, just as we've done with others, you're going to be sworn in, and we'd ask you to limit your remarks to matters which you have personal knowledge. We're also, for time's sake, we want to hear from everyone who desires to speak. But for time's sake, as we get to each of these, I'll ask for just a show of hands, and we'll do a quick documentation of that show of hands, just of support and not support. So we have that on the record, and then those that wish to speak can speak, and that's how we'll do that. So first, we're going to start with any that wish to testify in favor of this. Now's your chance. All right. Do you wish to speak, or just registering the one registered in favor that I see? So the record can reflect.
Oh.
We got a few. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we got 5 or 6 outside of the applicant as well. So we'll register 5 or 6 or so that are registered in favor. Any members wish to, or any of the public wish to speak on this, or if not, we've noted that. Thank you for that. Do you wish to speak? Go ahead. Yep. If you want to queue up after her, come on down here.
Please state your name.
My name is Ellen Darden, 6325 River Road.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Okay.
My remark is very, very brief, and it just points out one single issue that I haven't heard anybody mention yet in your questions or in the testimony. I'm also a realtor. This is a very, very strong issue that you're dealing with, and that has to do with private property rights, guaranteed by our U.S. Constitution and stated even more firmly in your Florida Constitution, which you all have sworn to uphold. And I just wanted to raise that issue because it's not been raised before. I think this is an opportunity for our community, that it will keep that area from being developed into commercial, retail, or heavy residential. It will end up preserving land. It will not impact traffic. The alternatives could be a lot more damaging to our community. Thank you.
Okay. Does any member of the commission wish to question this witness? Seeing none, you're free to go. Thank you. Next up, if you want to speak after this, go ahead and come on down and stand off to the side here. We'll try to move as quickly as we reasonably can. Yes, sir.
Please state your name.
Chad Erickson.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay.
First of all, I grew up here, have a family here, a small business here, and I just looking at the evidence tonight, I like the fact that they're scraping the gas station, just get the hazardous waste, get it out of there, creating the vegetation buffer, and then eliminating the ability to build housing out there, and just increasing the size of this lake, and mainly the ability to eliminate the housing. That's all. Let's keep it short.
Okay. Thank you. Any members of the commission wish to question the witness? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. And while these folks are testifying, please, just no sidebar murmuring, and we'll give you the same respect if you choose to speak as well. Thank you.
Please state your name.
Kelly DeSoto, 3500 South Atlantic, New Smyrna Beach.
Do you swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I just wanted to come up and say a few words in favor of this project. I have to say, like a lot of the residents here, when I walked in, I felt the reservations for what the project was projecting, but learning and hearing the testimony and the evidence, doing a little research prior to this meeting when I heard that it was happening, I think what's important to, and some of the two folks that just spoke hit on this is deferring. I take it very seriously. This is the gateway to our community. And I've lived here long enough to remember when that Shell station was in operation and the amount of traffic that it increased for that area, and everybody coming off Interstate 95, filling up trucks of all sizes, vehicles, having to dart across 2 lanes and do the U-turn to get back on heading north or south. was far more significant than what we're talking about here. If you drive out and make, I do a lot of traveling throughout the community, and making an extra 15 or 20 trips out 44, we're talking about one entity doing that. I don't see the significance there in traffic. What I do like, though, knowing what else is being planned and proposed for our activity centers, if you will, which is our gateway, which is our interchange, I like the idea of the future development being deferred. Ultimately, something may happen there in the future. We all recognize that. But knowing that it's going to be deferred, and also knowing that we are reducing the development in the future, not eliminating it. It's something will be developed at some point in time way in the future, I'm sure of it, whether it's the Kitchens family or they sell it off one day, way into the future, it will be reduced on what can be there now. And so having a green space temporarily over the next 2 to 5 years, having this temporary construction going on, hearing that it's minimal, seeing some of these other sites on how they do it and keeping it minimal, I can live with that, knowing that in the future, the overall looking long vision, not short term, I can tolerate that for the next 2 to 5 years, knowing that we're going to reduce the density on the overall size there, knowing that across the highway, going to be large development, knowing on the west of 95, near Walmart and across the raceway there's already big plans that's going to be happening perhaps in the future of those. So why not preserve a little more green space into the gateway coming east? Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member of the commission wish to question the witness? Thank you. Others wishing to speak in favor?
Can I create a third category?
Sure. Come ahead for that third category.
Please state your name.
Mel Rodriguez.
Do you swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
So help me God. The third category would be undecided. Is that all right?
That's good.
I live in the Glen Oaks division, adjacent to this project. And we have a severe flooding issue. I've been out there 18 years. We've gotten together with the community on many occasions to get the county to help us and with this problem with flooding. I don't think that you're going to have a problem getting the ecosystem back up, because every storm, it gets nearly knee-deep in our neighborhood. So this flooding comes directly from this property and also from the south. I would like to go on record tonight that someone is going to push the issue with St. John's Water Management, that they would not just look at the wetlands on that property, but also the adjacent surrounding wetlands, especially our neighborhood. And any significant change on this property is going to bring, I believe, a significant amount of harm to our neighborhood as it relates to the flooding. So I know that that wasn't brought up with others, and I know that letters were sent out to those who have a property exactly adjacent to their property line, but the whole neighborhood is in a challenge with this flooding issue that comes from this property. So thank you, commissioners, for taking note of this, but please include Glen Oaks with this water issue, because the flooding is significant, and I can submit pictures and videos.
Okay.
And thank you.
Thank you. Does any member of the commission wish to question? All right, I'm not going to repeat that after every single one. If you have questions, just jump in when they finish. Any others wish to testify in favor of this application? If you have new evidence to add to anything they added. Seeing none, moving forward. We'll now hear from those wishing to oppose. And again, we'll start with just show of hands. We'll kind of try to codify that. If you'll raise your hands, keep them up for a minute. So I'm seeing, I'd guesstimate in the 30, 35, 40 hands, something in that neighborhood. All right. So that's registered. We've got that. If any wish to speak on this, you're more than happy to speak. If you agree with what someone's saying, feel free to nod. We'll be observing that. If you'd like to speak after her, just queue up here.
Marvel Richards, 1099 Clubhouse Boulevard.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I live this. I don't have all the education and degrees and everything with everything that's just been presented, but I live with this every single day out there. And we have a lot of construction that's coming right there at that intersection. They're going to widen Sugar Mill Drive to 4 lanes. There will be the new hospital. There's a 7-Eleven Plaza. There's the build out of Coastal Woods. It would be incredibly dangerous to allow these trucks. The Advent Health Park is, as you know, right there. There are 4 doctors in the Advent Health Park now. There's a rehabilitation center. There's a lab work. There are many meetings there. I happen to go there for a lot of meetings. And it is hard right now to get out of there and get back over to turn onto Sugar Mill for me to come back home. It's dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous. And most of the people using the health park are senior citizens. Put that in there with having to navigate all these trucks. It has to affect our traffic. I mean, there's simply no way, I don't care what numbers they give, that it won't affect our traffic. My other thing is I don't see the benefit to the city of making a beautiful entrance. What other benefit is there? We're not getting any tax revenue. We're not getting anything to help with infrastructure, school, water issues. I don't know. I question that. The other thing is, Mr. Storch, where is he? I'll do this. There is no fill needed for the hospital. I am on the Hospital Foundation Board. I was at a meeting yesterday, and we were told that there will be no fill that needs to be brought in there at all. There is plenty of fill on the property that will have to be dispersed on the property, but no trucks with fill will be having to go in there. The 21 conditions, I'm very concerned about those. City does not have the staff to keep on top of these conditions. You know it, and we all know it. It's just impossible. You would have to hire a staff just to keep track of this. And St. John's Water Management, if they come out and check, they might shut it down. But previous experience tells me they don't come very often and check. So I am urging you strongly to think about this for the citizens out there and all the people that travel that road, and vote no.
Thank you. Any questions? Nope. Yes, ma'am, next up. All right, so I got one last favor to ask. No clapping. We've done so good this far. I'll let you have that one. I'll let you have the one clap, so we all heard it. We got it. And now we're going to go, if you can do me that favor. Yes, ma'am, sorry about that.
My name is Roberta Gibson Minor. I live at 2839 South Oceano Court, New Smyrna Beach.
Do you swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Just briefly, the one thing that I have not heard mentioned is the speed limit in front of that parcel is 55 miles an hour. So with those trucks trying to go across 2 lanes of traffic to get in a left turn lane, and there already have been multiple accidents at the turn of Sugar Mill, a rollover last week of, I believe, 44 last year. It seems to me that that's another issue that would need to be addressed. The other issue that I have, or I guess the bottom line, which we've heard frequently today, is that this does not appear to meet the criteria for an exemption. It is detrimental to public health if there are environmental issues, and certainly detrimental to the safety and public health with the traffic conditions. And I would hope we could have a better gateway to our town. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone wish to question? No, thank you. And I appreciate you limiting it to new evidence. I do appreciate that. Yes, ma'am, next up.
Good evening. Thanks for doing all of this.
You're welcome. Name and address, and then she'll swear you in.
Claudia Vanderhorst, 562 Aeolian Drive.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right.
I was the person that spoke at the P&Z meeting, and the point I made there was an elephant in the room that was minimized to be the size of a mouse, and Mr. Storch is very good at doing that, and he did it again, where he focuses on the benefits, and I use quotes, benefits to us, while minimizing the cost to us. And all of what's going on for 2 to 5 years until we get to the la-la land of the lake setting. It's not talked about, the cost to the city and the residents, our support services, during that 2 to 5 year period till we get there. Along with all of the other development that's going on, has been previously brought up. That's increasing traffic. At the P&Z meeting, they stated that 1 truck is the equivalent of 5 cars. So if 1 truck is coming out every 7 minutes, that means 5 cars are coming out every 7 minutes. The math doesn't add up. The figures that are tossed out here just don't add up. Things have been minimalized. The impact to the community is huge. There's not enough impact fee. There's not enough real estate, property taxes to justify this. It will interfere with our basic enjoyment of our community. Coming to and from the beach, going to and from work, running our businesses, taking care of our families. I employ your, my email that I sent you is if this is a no, you will be heroes. And I ask you to be heroes.
Thank you. Any questions of the witness? Next up.
Hello.
Hello. Give your name and address.
Brian White, 2464 Lydia Way, New Smyrna.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. What I asked the commission to consider is the previous presentations given by Mr. Storch and his clients and other projects. I got up here and spoke in a previous proceeding regarding the Beacon luxury apartments on the corner of Glencoe and 44. And what was promised to us at that time was that this would be a development that was marketed toward retirees, the meaning that $1,200 a month single one-bedroom apartments are not appropriate for anyone but young urban professionals. And I remarked at that meeting that I didn't think there were that many of those people here in New Smyrna Beach, ready to move into those facilities. And I was concerned about who would be moving into those apartments. And we were promised at that time that those facilities would be marketed toward retirees who didn't want to purchase real estate in our area. And if you drive past that development today, you will see marketing up on the fence that is a photograph of millennials like me hoisting highballs up around a pool deck, and just doesn't seem, it's very disingenuous. People come up here and make presentations, and what meets out in the end is not what they said. So I asked the commission to consider those previous presentations in today's proceedings and how that will affect those of us who actually live here and want to make this a better community for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Thank you, sir. Next up. And just as a reminder also, just address the commission in your comments. We're the ones to be talking to here. Yes, sir. Name and address, and then she'll swear you in.
Joe Flutka at 3382 Leonardo Lane in the Venetian Bay area in beautiful downtown Smyrna Beach.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't know. He just said Venetian was downtown, so I don't know if we can.
First off, I want to thank the commission for all you've done in the last year. I think you've had a lot of wins, and I think you've done a great job of being good stewards in our community. And I thank you for that. You have a great vision for the community, and we're working towards that. Several of you have said in the past that you didn't want 44 to become a Dunlawton. This project takes us way below Dunlawton, no doubt about it. The gentleman before talked about how things don't come out the way you wanted. We only have to look at a couple of car dealerships to see how that's happened. So we've got concerns. Okay? I think for the gateway that we have here, we need to take that into account. Another important aspect is the usage for that area. That's right off of 95. It is our entranceway. It is the real sell we have to the area. shouldn't we look to more long-term and give our economic development people some time to develop it into maybe some medical, I don't know, space industries, things like that that could really benefit us instead of another pit? I have no problems with borough pits. As everybody said, there's a lot of them out to the west. Great place for them. But in our gateway, thank you, and I appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Any questions? Nope. Thank you. Good to go. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, my name is Mike Shilsky. I live at 1009 Staggerbush Place.
Thank
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a concerned citizen, a resident of New Smyrna Beach for the last 47 years. I started teaching down here in 1973. I've watched sleepy little New Smyrna Beach grow considerably. A lot of it's smart growth, some of it not so smart growth. I can remember when 44 was a 2-lane road that had no shoulders whatsoever. And what we see today that concerns me the most is the traffic. This project does not concern me about what they're going to do with the property as much as it does with the safety of the traffic concerns and these large trucks coming out onto our highway. These are 70,000-pound loaded trucks coming out on 44, having to cross 2 lanes in order to make a U-turn. Very rarely are they going to go straight down into town, but they're going to tear up the roads. A lot of these trucks take up to a quarter of a mile just to build up speed. We have people coming in from the west on 44. We have people coming off Interstate 95 from the south coming on to 44. These trucks, as they're pulling out onto the highway, are going to be very detrimental to the safety. People are going to get hurt. There's going to be accidents. There's going to be road rage. You can stagger those lights all you want, but we all know from spring to fall, the amount of people that we have coming in from the Orlando area, we have traffic backed up all the way out to Venetia Bay on 44. God forbid people get hurt. God forbid somebody gets killed. Can understand digging a bar pit. I have no reason to doubt the need for that. Maybe this isn't the right place for it, but we don't want to have to start digging holes for somebody that might be a fatality. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. You give your name and address, and Carrie will swear you in.
My name is David Bruce, and I live at 228 Live Oak Lane here in New Smyrna Beach.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. I had spent about 30-some years working for Cornell University in the area of community development and economic development. And one of the things that we talked about in those past days is that communities never remain the same. They either get better or they get worse. And projects that we take on have those possibilities of creating a worse scenario for our community, not only in the short term, but in the long term as well. And one of the factors that I just heard the other gentleman talk about was trust. And I hope that the information that we're sharing with you tonight and the concerns that we have, that you will value what we're saying and that we trust you and trust the information so we make good, solid decisions so our community down the road can say we've made the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I thought we were, you snuck it into the wire. I thought we were almost finished.
I'm trying to surprise you.
All right.
My name is James Lorch. I live at 630 St. Andrews Circle, New Smyrna Beach.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
Thank you.
Okay. One of the things I would like to remind Mayor and the Commissioners of is the fact that there's basically one thoroughfare east and west coming into New Smyrna Beach. We don't benefit from having 3 or 4 major roadways coming into our town, okay? And so by adding this type of project with the number of trucks, and I'm not sure that we can guarantee that it's only going to be 47 trucks, because there's not going to be out there counting them every single day and shutting off a gate once they hit 47. Okay, so with the fact that we only have one way to get in and out of this town, that's a good thing in some ways, but it's not a good thing with adding a project like this that's going to create additional traffic with big trucks coming in and slowing traffic down, because they don't operate from start to get going like an automobile does. So I'd just like to ask you to consider that in your decision-making process. We don't want this type of project here. It belongs 8 miles west on 44 from the 95 interchange. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no others. There for a minute, I thought the applicant may get the continuance by default if we just run out of time. Okay, so this is now the time for closing remarks. The commission will first hear from the city, and then the applicant. Please limit what you have to say as to what's been presented to the commission in form of testimony. Once that is finished, this is for the commission as well, once that is finished, the goal is that will close the public hearing, and then it will be our discussion. If we have questions for staff, I guess that would be acceptable, but I'd like to start wrapping that up. So with that, we'll hear it from staff.
Just a couple minor closing points. With reference to an existing borrow pit on the property. That borrow pit, as Jeff mentioned, has been inactive since the 70s, and obviously the surrounding area has changed quite a bit in the last 40 years. Can you hear me now? Is that better? So with that, there are no entitlements at this property because there was a borrow pit. That's better. There's no entitlements on the property due to the presence of an existing borrow pit that was there in the 70s. This is an entirely new application that stands on its own. In reference to the access to the site and the signal and the driveway, staff had concerns about both locations. We looked at the driveway at the gas station and the signal, and there's delay with the signal, but we saw a traffic safety concern with using the driveway for access. And in weighing those two, we felt like the signal would be the better location. However, as we've mentioned, FDOT's opinion is that the driveway would be the preferred location. And as far as we know, FDOT has not approved or issued a permit for that driveway location. They have indicated that's their preference. However, that permit is dependent on our approval of the project. So just to clarify those three items, here for any further questions.
Okay. We'll let the applicant speak, and then we'll come to questions. Applicant, any closing comments?
Thank you. First of all, I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight and the fact that you allowed us to do this up front as opposed to waiting for everybody else. And I appreciate everyone's input as well. This is important to us for the future of New Smyrna to make sure that everything is done correctly. I think we've made it clear that it's our goal to do just that, to make sure that we listen to the input that we've received and to do the project correctly. If there's things that we can do that will assist in that, we will continue to do that. We will listen to additional conditions if necessary. The comments that we've heard really, the one issue I thought was interesting was flooding. Because if there is flooding off this site, obviously the creation of a larger lake on the site that could be used for stormwater would be something we would look at. And we'd be glad to look at that as part of any site plan review that might help try to prevent any flooding off the site. You've got flooding on the site now that exist, and most of the conditions that the opponents were concerned about are existing issues. And so my goal is always to try to make things better. If we can do things where we can take some of the existing issues and make them better, we can, by using this, we can do that. This is I gotta tell you, this is a very small borrow pit. Most borrow pits are around 50 acres. As I say, this is 18 acres. Most borrow pits use a lot more trucks. This is using a minimum truck. I was not inferring that the fact that we had an existing borrow pit gave us a vested use. The fact that we have that the use is listed as a special exception and a permitted use as a special exception is what I was referring to. So I want to make clear that's not the case. But the fact that it's an existing borrow pit does make it easier to show there's no real impact. And the only issue that I think we've talked about so far is the safety. The expert testimony is this is very safe, and the traffic issues are very safe. FDOT has said this is safe. We can't do anything more than the testimony that we have as far as the traffic engineers and FDOT saying this is a safe mechanism. And the same with the environmental issues. St. John's, we have to rely upon our experts that we know and the evidence presented to show how we can make this correct. So I hope we've done that, and we will continue to work with the city if allowed to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, the Quasi Judicial Public Hearing is closed, and we'll now consider this proposed special exception for this property.
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
When we made the change for the court reporter, I wasn't quite finished with my questions from the applicant and some other points that I wanted to make.
Okay. If you'd like to continue with those now, please. Applicant, you may be needed.
One question to the attorney. You have a 5-year window of opportunity, so to speak, to complete your work.
Correct.
When would that begin?
It would begin at the time that the actual construction takes place.
When would that conceivably be? Would that be after you receive all your permits?
Yeah, that's right. You have to go through a site plan review process with the city, so you'd have to get that done. And so when the site plan is approved, that's when your 5 years would start.
My concern is we've had a lot of difficulties in this town with things that have been approved in the past. They've been PUDs, and they have been given very specific rules and regulations. My concern is if the economy downturns, that you might not start operations for 5 or 6 years.
That's a good point.
I don't want to have that as
No.
a condition, and I would like to see, if we do even consider an approval, is that we place a maximum time frame after you receive site plan approval here, of perhaps maybe a year for that 5-year time period to run, so that it doesn't become a problem for some future commissioner.
Absolutely, that's more than reasonable. We would stipulate to that. And in fact, the 5 years probably starts running as far as the permit from St. John's upon issuance of the permit. And I think we've just received that, is that correct?
Yes, but they also give extensions.
That's true.
But we don't.
You could, that's
Or we
true.
might not, I should say. Excuse me on that one.
You want to comment?
Under item...
Vice Mayor, just staff wanted to comment on that.
One of our conditions is that the borrow pit shall have a limited time period for operations and special exception approval for a maximum of 5 years from city approval of the site plan and all other required permits.
So that kind of,
I understand that, but they might not apply for everything.
And we would have and I would have no objection to a stipulation that we would be required to apply for it and receive our permits within that 1 year period.
Okay. In
Other questions?
item 6B, where you establish your hours of operation Monday through Friday, I know you testified to it, that you wouldn't operate on holidays, but I would like to see that added to that particular condition if we go down to the approvals.
Absolutely, and that would be
I
a
don't want to see
stipulation.
4th of July
No.
when everybody else is driving on 44.
We don't either. So that would be a stipulation.
The item 7 in the start refers to the site plan approval. I would like a condition that that final approval come back before this board.
And I've already indicated we would stipulate to that.
Okay. 7D, on the wetlands plan, you indicated that you're providing a 50-foot buffer, which I think is just great. I'm glad I asked for it. And I would like to see the silt fence move back to that point.
No objection. We could stipulate to that as well.
When you get down to item H, which I believe is under the same number, about the berm being constructed, I would like, and you say you want to sell the berm when you've sold everything else. I would like to see that berm stay in place until such time as the future plans come about.
That seems fair. That's fine, and we would stipulate that as well.
Okay, now, I've heard from the people in the audience about the problems with inspections. Would you be willing to establish a special inspection bond that would provide, authorized by the city, construction observation that would require an inspector to be on the site at least 1 hour of every one of your days, Monday through Friday.
Is that okay? Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I like that. And yes, we would agree to that and stipulate to it.
Okay, because we did, a couple of months ago, modify our land development regulations to provide construction mitigation where you have to follow the federal guidelines. However, that's not always enforced by all the other agencies that come about.
It is.
And if it's not enforced and it's our mistake, then it's our fault. But I want us to have that responsibility for the inspection to assure that it would move forward.
And I recognize that sometimes city staff is stretched. I would have no objection to that.
Okay. Those are my basic questions. Are you willing to accept comments at this time?
I am, but I'll tell you what, let's go, we'll start down here and go this way for comments, give you a chance to grab some water. Or questions, if you got
Question
questions.
to staff is, has there been any preliminary stuff done with any construction as regards to the Advent Health property?
No.
So, there's been nothing?
We have I'm sorry. We have a meeting scheduled to discuss the PUD as the first step of the project.
Okay. Because some of the comments and concern was the hospital was going to be built during the same period, but obviously that's not going to happen. We talked about the site plan, we talked about time to start. To the applicant, the gas station buffer zone will be completed when?
It would be completed prior to any excavation whatsoever.
Okay.
All the buffer requirements would be required to be completed prior to any excavation.
And that would be in the site plan?
That's correct.
Would you be amenable to changing the hours of operation from 7 a.m. to maybe 9 a.m.?
Has he been sworn in?
Jim Laux.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I'll be.
Okay, it's not really expert testimony, I don't guess, so.
No.
Go ahead.
The question was to change from 7 till 9?
Yes.
Okay, currently we're set to open at 7, but no trucks go on the road till 8.
Okay.
To tell you the truth, we would prefer to go to the 9 because the heavier traffic is at 8 o'clock in the morning when most folks are trying to go to work.
Yeah, that's,
So to answer your question, yes, we would.
Yes, we would.
okay.
It's not a problem.
Thank you.
So would you need the 2-hour start time, or?
No, normally we would.
We just stipulate?
Yeah, we wouldn't have any trucks leaving the site until 9 o'clock.
Okay. If it gets approved, there's still the possibility that FDOT would deny their access points?
Until they've issued the permit, that possibility exists.
Okay. And if it gets approved, then it could eventually, if something else comes up, could it be denied at the site plan process? That would be something to work through any issues or concerns that we had at that time then, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I address the...
No, sorry. If somebody asks you a question, you can. Commissioner McGurk, you have any questions? I'd like to move to comments if you're ready for that. I didn't have any more questions. I think everybody, did you have any more questions or just comments at this point?
One brief question.
A brief question. Did you have a question or a comment? Just
No
comments.
question.
All right, last question, and then we're just going to move to comments and be done.
Mr. Storch, has the applicant's family paid the fees on the violations that were incurred on the property, the gas station?
The property that's before you tonight is the special exception area, which is the ag area. That's not the gas station. So as far as whether there's fees or code enforcement issues on the gas station, I don't know. I will tell you that if this goes through, we would be willing to pay for those to make sure it's taken care of. I don't know if you know this, but we have also, I don't know if you know this, but staff asked us about this problem before, we're the ones that went out there and cleaned everything up because it was important. So.
Thank you.
All right, if no other questions, we'll start with Commissioner comments. And McGirt, you haven't spoken on this item yet, so do you want to lead off, or?
Well, there's lots been said. I don't think I have much to add. I think my concern for this project right now is still the transportation issue of the trucks entering the State Road 44 to go eastbound, have to cut across the traffic. That is still something that is unresolved and that I have a deep problem with. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Commissioner Sacks, closing comments on this item before we make a motion. Anything to add to what you already said? Or what has already been said by others?
Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, I took an oath to protect the safety, health, and welfare of the people. And with all the evidence I've received tonight, I don't believe I can do that if I approve this project.
Okay. Commissioner Hartman, closing comments.
I've said this publicly because I met with a group of concerned citizens the other day. I think that the good outweighs the bad, but the bad really concerns me is the truck traffic. With that, I don't know how we get to that from here tonight, whether we table it and revisit FDOT or how we get to that, but that is a major concern of mine. And then along with, I think we put in place where we can deal with the environmental and the stormwater issues, the flooding issues, where we can shut you down. We've taken care of someone on site to review. We also have the traffic study at any time during that first year. But I still have concerns about the trucks leaving the site from where they're at. And I wish somehow FDOT would have been a little more.
Our attempt to solve that was the provision, the staff provision that says it's not only a traffic study, but also a corrective use requirement. And if we can't correct it, we're shut down.
Any other comments? Commissioner Hartman, you finished?
I'm finished.
Vice Mayor, closing comments.
First of all, one of the things I most respect is the property rights of people to develop their property. This is a borrow pit. It's a special approval type of item. I see that there are future benefits that may outweigh the short-term problems. However, there's issues that I'm not comfortable with. And I should probably preface that by, I don't know if everybody's aware of it, but I am a licensed professional engineer, surveyor, and planner. I've worked with these type of applications. In fact, I prepared them any number of times in the last 45 years, which I hate to admit. Probably the first thing that concerns me is more of a legal and an engineering question. B3 is a zone that does not allow special exceptions of this type. Yet the access is solely through this. To me, that's part of the application. Now, that question will get answered one way or the other, either by the applicant or by the town attorney. However, that answer affects where the access from the property would be, which would affect the traffic analysis and the traffic study. I kind of alluded to that earlier, and I think that type of question has to be answered before I'm comfortable with this project. The wetlands concern me probably more than anything else. I look at that topography, I see it's, as my wife would say, flat as a pancake. There's little depressions here or there. These wetlands are all interconnected with ditches, some of which are digging up. In some places, you might be putting water back in a different area. You haven't supplied any real testimony to answer or to satisfy me that it can be done. I know as an engineer, anything can be done, but I really want to see it in more detail than it's been presented to me. One technical concern I have that hasn't been addressed is I know ponds are allowed to be constructed at 2 to 1. I know you've done analysis soil borings, you've looked into that, but there's really been no testimony that that's sustainable. If it wasn't so close to the wetlands, it might not be that much of a concern, but I do have that concern. I wish that I had had the chance to bring all these items up in public before we vote. I would have liked a continuance, and I would have liked to have presented my concerns. As I first stated, property rights, very important. I've received 45 different emails and phone calls from people who live in this area, travel through this area, and have real concerns. I might not share all those concerns, yet I haven't heard anything that really dissuades me from voting no on this project at this time. Thank you.
Okay. And my last comments would be this. First, to all those that reached out and emailed, I tried to respond to as many as possible. I know my fellow commissioners, I'm sure, did as well. I can tell you it felt like hundreds. He said 45. I feel like I got more than that. So I'm sure I missed responding to a few, but I can tell you I read all of those. To those taking the time to be here tonight, we really thank you for that, your passion for this community, no matter which side of this issue you saw. And I appreciate your patience. You know, this is the legislative process, and know that if it were your property, your family's property, we'd give you that same due process. So thank you for that. For me, the question is really all that it boils down to the section 305.04. Does this impair the character of the surrounding or adjoining districts, and is it detrimental to the public health, morals, and welfare? I think the morals are okay, but the others are questions. You know, it's 7 trucks a minute. The evidence was presented 90% going east, or at least it was stated 90% of those would go east. I don't know what the foundation for that is. There are some redeeming qualities. My colleagues have spoke to it, some that spoke in the audience spoke to it. We're getting rid of the old gas station. That's something I'm passionate about. No matter what happens with this project, I'd like to see us pursue that. It does delay future development on that site, which I know is something many in New Smyrna, many that spoke tonight are passionate about. It's a reduction of future densities on that particular site. And I can tell you, if this isn't approved and, in 3 weeks we're back here to talk about a 500 home subdivision or whatever's allowable on that site, this room will, it'll be standing room only again. And there are, as one person testified to, there are private property owner rights afforded to each of you that are property owners in this room, and those are things that sometimes are above our pay grade or even our ability to control. But in this case, it's a request for a special exception. So I'd say if my colleagues support this, I think that we've given a lot of effort, and I think staff and the applicant, I think we've given a lot of effort to trying to make this the best that it can possibly be. So I do appreciate the goodwill of the applicant and staff's effort. But for me, I personally can't support this special exception because I don't feel it meets section 305.04 at this time. With that, I'm going to ask for a motion, and just last clarification for the audience. You hear whoever makes the motion, they'll say a motion to approve. That doesn't mean they actually support it. You just always make motions in the affirmative, and then you either vote yes or no on that motion. So don't be worried if someone says I make a motion to approve. That's not necessarily how they feel about the topic. So that can be confusing if this is your first one of these. So with that, I'd ask for a motion on this item. To have a motion to approve the special exception use of a borrow pit for the vacant property located on the south side of State Road 44. It can also die for lack of a motion, which would mean
It's best to have a motion and give an affirmative
Yeah,
so that staff can issue any letters that need to go out.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's a judicial process. I think we have to. We're this far, guys. We got to give an opinion.
Okay, based on that recommendation, I make a motion to approve, and that it include all the recommendations of the planning department, and includes all the requested changes that I have brought forth in this public hearing.
That the applicant agreed to during
And
the
the
hearing.
stipulation for Commissioner Hartman as well.
Yeah.
Yes, whether they agree to it or not.
That's true.
You know.
They did agree to all of them, but good point. All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
City Clerk, if you'd call the roll, please.
Commissioner Hartman?
No.
Commissioner McGurk?
No.
Commissioner Sacks?
No.
Vice Mayor Coloni?
No.
Mayor Owen?
No. This special exception is denied. Thank you all for your patience. We're going to take a 5-minute recess. All right, we're still on item 3, approval of the agenda. And with that, gentlemen, I have a request, if y'all would be so inclined. It is 9 o'clock. We're making up for all those first 2 meetings of the year that we got out so early. I don't think there's any way we're going to make it through all of these items, and I want to make sure we get through those that are noticed, so we don't have to re-notice those. So would anyone be opposed to postponing item 7A, the formula business discussion? I think that's one that merits enough time to talk about, so I propose we postpone that. I think in scanning this, we can get through the rest of them if we postpone that item, but I don't know if we can get through them all. Any objections to postponing 7A to a future meeting?
Do you need a motion or just?
Just if there's nobody opposed, I think we're good. All right.
All right.
Item 7A, if you were sticking around for 7A, we will hear it at some future date. And with that, we have announcements and recognitions. Feels weird to do this at this time of night.
Is he still here?
All right, we have a proclamation of, Jake, if you would join me down here, please. This is a recognizing I can't say this because I'm not Greek, but New Smyrna, New Smyrna, and New Smyrna Beach as sister cities. And I asked Jake to join me. He brought this to the commission, I think, first. This was one of his initiatives, and so I'll read this. I think he had a few comments. And then there was someone in the audience, I'm sorry, did they stick around or they? Yes, come on ahead, yes.
Mr. Mayor, we have several.
I'm so sorry, yeah, that's right. Thank you all for your endurance. Yes, yeah, right, we're testing the family ties here already. How much you really want to be sisters?
So if I, Mr. Mayor,
yes.
I could quickly introduce our
Sure, please.
We have Athos Comedis. Athos Comedis is a local, wonderful person who is a member of AHEPA. AHEPA is the American Hellenic Education Progressive Association. That beautiful monument we have in the park is for AHEPA and is a commemoration of the almost ancient Greek people who came here in the late 1700s to inhabit our wonderful area. And they're still here. And they're still wonderful, and we want to celebrate a joining of a sister city with the same name in Nea Smyrna. We also have Polly Hillier. Polly is from
I'm from St. Augustine, Florida, St. Butchers, and I'm representing the Consul General Dimitri Spados from Tampa of the Hellenic Republic Consulate Office.
I couldn't have said it better. Thank you. And we have Honorable Greg Holbrook is our director of the museum, of course.
Never been referred to as honorable. Thank you.
Yes. And I'm sorry.
And you don't know me.
No.
I'm Leanne Bennett. I am chairwoman of the Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you.
I'll be here tomorrow night at
There you go for your meeting. All right, pronounce this for me one more time. It's
Nea Smyrna.
Nea Smyrna.
Yes, and if we could please acknowledge Kelly for her hard work
Yes.
putting this together after 2.5 years.
Yes. All right. So whereas Nea Smyrna is a municipality in southern suburb of Athens, Greece, and was named after the former Greek city Smyrna, and whereas New Smyrna Beach celebrates the heritage of early colonial Greek settlers who arrived with Dr. Andrew Turnbull in 1768, and whereas this historic British colony was named after Dr. Turnbull's wife's hometown of Smyrna, Greece. And all of us husbands in the audience can understand that. Whereas in 2019, the city of New Smyrna Beach extended an invitation to the mayor of Nea Smyrna, Stavros, in an effort to establish friendship and understanding between the citizens of New Smyrna Beach and the municipality of Nea Smyrna. I know I'm butchering it every time, I'm sorry. Whereas, on behalf of the Greek Consulate General's office located in Tampa, Florida, they accepted our offer of friendship and expressed their willingness and desire to actively embrace a partnership involving education, culture, and friendship. And whereas the recognition of our first official sister city, this is our first, we have another one I think in the works, with the city in France. But this should be recognized as a fitting occasion to commemorate the significant impact of an alliance which could bring limitless possibilities. Now therefore I, Russell, and Mayor of the City of New Smyrna Beach, do hereby proclaim the municipality of Nea Smyrna and the City of New Smyrna Beach as sister cities. From the small beginning, we hope this partnership will continue for many generations, fostering educational, economic, and professional exchanges. We look forward to an exciting future. And I think you had just a few words to share on behalf of someone else.
Thank God he didn't come from Tampa, though, guys. Your Honor and Commissioners, he said, when I was first invited by the HEP organization to attend the annual celebration at the Odyssey Memorial in New Smyrna Beach 2 years ago, I couldn't believe that I was reading the invitation, New Smyrna Beach. New Smyrna, this must be a mistake by a HEPA. They probably wanted to write something else. New Smyrna is a municipality in the Athens metropolitan area, but it's landlocked and it doesn't have a beach. Luckily, we live in the age of the internet, so soon enough I found out about the history of the place, and I was amazed. More than 1,000 settlers from several locations in the Mediterranean, and among them 500 Greeks. Unfortunately, the settlers faced terrible and inhumane conditions and then fled to St. Augustine. This is a piece of history which until recently was unknown in Greece. It is, however, very important for the Greek Americans for whom this historical event is as important as Plymouth Rock for the Americans of Anglo-Saxon origin. And I'm going to skip down here and say, so both places were built by settlers leaving their homeland in need. Both arrived in their new homes full of hopes of building a happier and healthier life. Both cities are connected directly with the mother city of Smyrna, an ancient city where civilization bloomed for thousands of years. And although the settlers who arrived here came from several places around the Mediterranean, Minorca, Corsica, Italy, etc., the connecting glue in this new relationship between the two cities is inevitably the Greek American community still present in the area and faithful. I'm certain that both cities will benefit from the upcoming sister cities relationship, and may this be the beginning of many new friendships. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's slide over here for a picture real quick. Come up that way. Jake.
So if you'd like to, yep, there you go, hold up the proclamation. Okay. 3, 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you all.
Good job. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Take care.
Oh, okay, that's fine. And we're probably not streaming either.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, right now? Or,
Why not?
I have a comment from Commissioner Colodi.
I really like this idea. Two things I want to point out, that the city in Greece is only 1.5 miles from the Parthenon, so it's really almost like a real inner city suburb. And in addition to getting a sister city, we're getting a sister-in-law city, because they have a sister city in Croatia. So our family is expanding. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Redefines the word growing too quickly.
All right, next item up is a presentation by Faith Miller and some of our colleagues over in UCF's Florida Solar Energy Center, a solar feasibility assessment report. And for this and future presentations, again, we're just really trying to beat the clock here. Know that we have read all the staff report, and we'll try to hit you with pertinent questions, but just put some shortening in it where you can. We appreciate it.
Okay, just good evening, Mayor and Commission. As you know, we entered into agreement with the UCF's Florida Solar Energy Center to evaluate 18 of our facilities. You received one report on the City Hall Annex back in July, and they're here to present they have a very brief presentation to go over on the other 17 and other energy efficiencies that we can do. So Chuck Withers, Don Metzger, and Karen Bonatti are here from UCF. They're going to do a quick presentation for you.
Thank you. Please come ahead. Thank you all for sticking with us to this point. We appreciate it sincerely.
Thank you, Commission, for the opportunity. My name is Chuck Withers with Florida Solar Energy Center, and just very quickly, wanted to recognize, besides the three of us that are here, Colleen Kettles, who couldn't be here, and Janet McElvain, as well as Keith Showalter, who helped a lot in this project. So, okay, to advance. Okay, there we go. So this is part of our project team. Very quickly, our center is, we focus on energy research, but we're also very involved in energy conservation types of projects, and we've been around for a long time, actually since 1976. And we have about 65 researchers and about 20 or 30 support staff there. Okay, so the assessment scope of what was our project and what were we charged to do was to, again, look at the feasibility of solar for certain city buildings, as well as energy conservation measure opportunities. So we looked at a total of 18 buildings, 17 of these buildings of which are occupied. The one building was the city annex, which is under current renovation. So again, with looking at the potential for solar, and some are familiar with the term net zero energy, and the goal is to, if you can, implement enough solar at a particular site to offset the total annual energy use of that building. So we wanted to look for the potential of that on a building by building site. And part of that involves going in, site visiting, looking at each building, going through those, accounting for what efficiency measures are already there. At this time, I'd also like to recognize that as we were going through buildings like just the City Hall here and other buildings, it was really nice to see that the city's already implementing some of the recommendations that we came out of in our findings. So things like LED lighting and lighting controls, and some of your new buildings that have been constructed are already implementing these things. So I think some of these things aren't even new to you, so it's good to see that. So with the audit, we evaluate not just what's on site, but we also take into account up to about 2 years of annual utility billing. And utility billing helps us to see really if for a given amount of square footage of a building and that type of building, if that looks to be higher than what we might expect. So that kind of helps create some flags of buildings to prioritize. Okay, so with that, very quickly, the top 5 conservation measures that we came up for your existing buildings that we looked at: lighting control, and in the larger report, there's the building by building that we indicate where these would be applicable. Retro commissioning, replace fluorescent fixtures with LED lighting, and that's again some things that you're already doing in some areas, and then as well as fluorescent fixtures, it's some of the high bay, high ceiling type HID metal halide fixtures. There's LED fixtures available for those now that look pretty promising. And then the other in the top 5 was to replace old straight cool, just air conditioning only air conditioning units. They're in that 3 to 5 ton range with with about a 16 SEER efficiency air conditioner if you can get that with a heat pump. And then again, we've got a number of buildings that fall under that type of thing. And so when we say replace old, that's usually, we think around 9 years or older, and it is kind of a case-by-case, situation. But as these units get older, that's, really ideal time to change these out, and you'll see that energy drop. Okay, so part of this evaluation of determining were our recommendations economical? Do they look reasonable? We actually, not knowing what any given budget's going to be or how much money you have, we wanted to evaluate each individual measure just on its own. And so that's what we did. And so we're just showing a summary here, for instance, of the lighting control. We indicate the expected lifespan of that, and then the annual return on investments are really good in general. And so it's sort of in order, right? Lighting controls, retro commissioning looks good. Retro commissioning was recommended for 2 buildings. They happen to be the 2 buildings that are using the highest amount of utility power. And then we have replacing high ceiling HID lighting with LED, and then replacing straight cool at the bottom. So you can see that annual investment starts to drop quite a bit as you get down lower, but nevertheless, these are the top recommendations. So there was some additional energy conservations to consider. We didn't throw them into primary recommendations, but we put them in there for your staff to consider, because it is, again, there might involve more information to determine if something like sealing air ducts you actually have to kind of do a little additional testing and evaluation to determine if there's certain ducts that need to have that done. But we had identified a couple buildings that based on where the ducts were located and so on, and the age of the building that might look good for them. Thermostat set point change, again, every degree that you raise the thermostat and cooling will tend to decrease the cooling energy use by about 8%. Again, that is a case-by-case thing. If you start dealing with the comfort of people and they're not happy, productivity is affected and it's not worth it. So it's just something you can try and implement, and if it works, great. If not, you can not use that. The last one was, we've done this and research and measured this, but painting older metal roofs with a white reflective paint does a lot to reflect a lot of the solar heat energy back off of the building. Again, this is only recommended if you have, where you expect maybe about 9 years of life left in that roof. It is something that, if you're going to replace the roof within 5 years, I wouldn't do that. Okay, at this point, what I want to do is turn it over to Mr. Donald Metzger, who's going to talk to us about the solar side of this. Thank you.
So my name is Donald Metzger. I'm a solar contractor for the Florida Solar Energy Center. We looked at the 18 buildings that you proposed and essentially visited each one of the buildings to see how much PV we could put on them and essentially what their orientation was, and ran a program called PV Watts. That's a program that's been built by the U.S. Department of Energy, and it essentially gives us a way to look at the orientation of the building, the tilt, and then figure out how much energy it would produce on an annual basis. After doing that, we did come up with the fact that 4 of the buildings could be net zero, and you can see those in the next slide, which I don't seem to be able to advance. There we go. Sorry about that. Oh, it's on the side. Okay, and so the ones in green there you can see are the ones that came up as zero energy buildings. And so what that means is that those buildings could produce as much energy as they use on a yearly basis. And you need to look at that yearly because it's a seasonal thing. So the other buildings that are there, we showed how much that they could produce based on the size of the system that we could actually put on the roof that was there. And so when we look at what they could produce based on their energy bills over a yearly period, we could then figure out what percentage we could offset those electrical bills with the solar that would go on those buildings. And that's going to be illustrated on this next slide here. And you can see what each one of those 17 buildings would then be offset by with the solar that would be added onto those. So the solar electric economics looks something like this. First of all, it's not a wise idea to build a larger system than you need in terms of what your energy usage is, because you don't get paid back correctly, or at least at a good clip there, if you oversize the system. So we don't want to oversize anything. 100% would be a maximum. That would be net zero. And so 4 of those buildings could do that. Install cost for commercial type PV is somewhere around $1.75 to $2 a watt. So if we know the size of the system, we can figure out how much it would cost, and then the rest of these numbers fall in place here. The cost considerations are the location of the system, the mounting methods that would be used, and the type of panel that you would put on there. If space is not an issue, you're going to use a typical panel, and it'll be a lower cost panel in terms of dollars per watt. The contractor is going to select the panel and offer that to you along with the price. The life expectancy of PV panels, they're warranted for 25 to 30 years. So at the end of that period, that doesn't mean they stop producing. It just means that they have degraded to a certain point, and there are warranties that essentially tell you how much they're going to produce at the end of that 25-year warranted period. And typically, for a 25-year power warranty, you're going to get about 80% of what the panel originally produced at the end of those 25 years. So if you had a 100-watt panel at the beginning, 25 years later, it will produce at least 80 watts. So they won't stop working. They do continue to degrade, but that life expectancy is not meaning that, it's going to die in 25 or 30 years. It would, especially if it's installed correctly and it's a quality product, it'll last a whole lot longer. The degradation numbers, as I spoke about, were about 0.5% a year. They're relatively maintenance-free. I have a system on my home. I've not done any maintenance to it in 10 years. The rain washes it clean. There's not really any problems that are typically associated with solar systems that are installed by a quality individual. And so don't buy the cheapest one you can get. Make sure you're just buying one that's being put on by a respectable contractor. The ROI on the systems, they've calculated out to be 2 to 3%. Mature market, I'm not a finance guy, I can't really speak too much to the finances there. But the total potential to offset your electric use is somewhere around 40% with the solar. If you incorporate the other energy saving measures that Chuck has talked about here, you could possibly save up to 47% of the energy or the cost of energy on your current buildings, in particular these 18 that we spoke about here. That's all we have here for that. Are there any questions?
All right, for the sake of time, I'd say probably best to do this. This is a deep topic that we can spend a lot of time on, so why don't we, while we have the experts here that gave us a ton of great information, I really do appreciate it. I appreciate you sticking out with us tonight. I want to make sure we get through questions for them, and then have to renotice those. Let's have a discussion about this on a future agenda. Let's have a discussion about some direction to give staff on this, but I don't think we have enough time to debate it healthily tonight. But any questions for the experts? Vice Mayor.
I read through the whole report, and I was really impressed by it. Now, I used to have a system on my house up north. I moved. I'm here. It was a 10K system. It was really totally reliable and everything. So my concern is a lot of these buildings are too small to really make a good, effective project. I saw 2 or 3 of them. One that you didn't highlight was the police department, and that didn't show a great return of investment, but it would be a great cost reduction because it's out in the open, it's got a nice flat roof. They just use a tremendous amount of energy.
Correct.
So I think that should also be a consideration for us because it would lower our bill.
It would.
And I like the LED, especially at the sports complex.
Commissioner Sachs indicated he didn't have any questions for the experts. Any questions, Commissioner McGurk?
First of all, thank you for waiting.
No problem.
Remind you why you didn't get into politics.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So historically, anytime that I've looked into solar, the cost of putting it in far exceeds the overall value you'll get out of it. So the panels may work for 25 or 30 years. There's a lot of equipment and other things you're going to be replacing.
I wouldn't say there's a lot of equipment that would be replaced. That's a misnomer. Number one, you're dealing with the